The wind howled across the endless white expanse, carrying with it a biting chill that seemed to cut straight to the bone. Ice stretched in every direction, an unbroken sea of frost, broken only by jagged mountains that rose like the spines of ancient beasts. The sky above was an endless gray, a heavy, oppressive canopy that pressed down on the frozen land, making it feel as if the world itself had been sealed away from time. This was Antarctica, a place so remote, so unforgiving, that for centuries it had existed only in the realm of legend. To the few who dared speak of it, it was the edge of the known world, a land where the rules of civilization seemed meaningless and where history itself had been swallowed by ice and snow. It was here, in this desolate and forbidding place, that a mystery older than modern memory waited to be uncovered. Hidden beneath layers of frost, buried under centuries of ice, lay a secret that had begun in a far warmer and more familiar world, the world of medieval Europe, of knights and kings, of oaths sworn in shadowed halls and blood-soaked crusades. For centuries, the Knights Templar, the most powerful and enigmatic order of the medieval era, had been whispered about in tones of reverence and fear. Their sudden and violent fall in the early 1300s left Europe shocked and trembling, their treasures seized, their knowledge banned, their very existence seemingly erased from history. Yet, in the icy silence of Antarctica, that erasure might have been incomplete. The possibility lingered, tantalizing and terrifying. What if the Templars, masters of secrecy and strategy, had not only survived their purge but carried with them something so extraordinary that it could challenge everything we think we know about the world? The first signs of the secret were subtle, almost imperceptible. Scholars and explorers had long dismissed them as myths or exaggerations. Maps that showed lands far to the south centuries before Antarctica was officially documented, strange relics discovered in European cathedrals that seemed to originate from nowhere, cryptic manuscripts written in codes so intricate that only the most devoted cryptographers could hope to decode them. Yet taken together, these fragments painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. The Templars had known more than anyone could have imagined, and some of that knowledge might have been carried to the furthest corners of the earth. Modern explorers, standing at the edge of ice cliffs that plunged into nothingness, often spoke of a strange sensation, a feeling that the land beneath their boots was not empty, that it held secrets waiting to be found. Some claimed to hear the echo of footsteps in the howling wind, though no human had passed there in recorded memory. Others noticed patterns in the ice, formations that seemed almost deliberate, as if some hand long vanished had carved tunnels, chambers, or monuments before the continent was fully understood. It was a landscape of extremes, beautiful, terrifying, and profoundly silent, where even the smallest disturbance could feel monumental. Every expedition carried the same mix of awe and unease, a sense that something ancient was watching, waiting, and perhaps judging those who dared trespass. But how could the Templars, who had once sworn their lives to the defense of the Holy Land and the secrecy of their order, have reached such a place? The answer, or at least the suggestion, lay in their mastery of navigation, their obsession with knowledge, and their relentless pursuit of hidden truths. While kings and clergy focused on gold and land, the Templars were rumored to seek something else entirely. Relics of the past, scrolls that predated known history, objects that might carry divine or unnatural power. If even a fraction of these rumors were true, it would explain why certain expeditions, carried out under the guise of trade or exploration, seemed to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only tantalizing clues and whispers of a southern sanctuary. Legends spoke of the Templars' escape in 1307, when armies loyal to the French crown swept across Europe, arresting knights in the dead of night. In the chaos, some managed to flee, slipping through the cracks of history with their knowledge and treasures intact. What became of them afterward remained the subject of debate and fantasy alike. Some were said to have joined other secret orders, moving east into the Middle East or north into the icy reaches of Scotland and Scandinavia. Others disappeared entirely, their names wiped from records, as if the world had agreed to forget them. And yet, certain encrypted texts hinted at a journey south, across oceans and into lands no map officially acknowledged. A land of ice, a place beyond the edge of all known worlds. It is tempting, and perhaps comforting, to dismiss such stories as fantasy. The mind recoils from the idea of medieval knights navigating the perilous waters of the southern hemisphere, charting a course into uncharted icy wastes. And yet, history is filled with improbable feats, with discoveries that seemed impossible until they were proven real. Marco Polo, Columbus, Magellan, all were considered dreamers, fools even, until their discoveries reshaped the understanding of the world. Could the Templars have been the same, guided by something other than ambition, something older, something dangerous? The very notion awakens a sense of primal awe. Antarctica, with its white deserts and jagged ice cliffs, becomes more than a landmass. It becomes a stage upon which history's hidden actors played a game that stretched across centuries. Every storm that roars across its plains, every crevice that yawns beneath the glaciers, is a reminder of time's relentlessness, of the impermanence of human endeavor. Yet beneath the ice, some truths endure, preserved in ways that defy conventional understanding. And there, perhaps, lies the Templars' legacy. Not in gold or titles, but in knowledge so precious, so potentially transformative, that it was worth hiding at the end of the world, far from prying eyes and corrupt kings. As the wind sweeps across the frozen horizon, one can almost imagine the knights themselves, figures in white cloaks with the red cross emblazoned upon their chests, trudging through the snow, leaving behind signs and structures meant only for those who could decipher them. It is an image both haunting and exhilarating. Men of faith and intellect, bound by vows and driven by a purpose that outstripped survival or greed, venturing into a landscape that would test every limit of human endurance. And in imagining this, one begins to understand the stakes, the fear, and the hope that accompanied their journey. This was not a simple flight from persecution. It was a deliberate quest, a mission carried out in secrecy, across oceans and ice, into the very heart of the unknown. And so, the question hangs in the frozen air, sharp and persistent. What did the Templars hide in Antarctica? Was it knowledge that could illuminate the past, technology that could alter the present, or secrets so profound that they challenged the very notion of history itself? Perhaps it was all of these things, interwoven into a tapestry of ambition, faith, and fear. Perhaps it is still there, buried beneath miles of ice, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover it. Every snowdrift, every glacier, every ice-crusted cliff is a silent guardian of a mystery that has survived the sweep of time and the cruelty of men, untouched and undiminished. The silence of Antarctica is not emptiness. It is a pause in history, a holding place for secrets too dangerous, too magnificent, or too sacred for the world above. And it is in this silence that the story begins. An epic tale of knights, betrayal, survival, and a secret that might change how we see the past. The frozen horizon stretches endlessly, and somewhere beyond the line where ice meets sky, the Templars' hidden legacy waits. The wind howls again, louder this time, carrying the weight of centuries across the white desert. And as the storm rages, it whispers a question to anyone daring to listen. Are you ready to uncover what was never meant to be found? The night was dark, thick with the weight of betrayal and fear. Torches flickered against the cold stone walls of castles and fortresses across France, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. In the streets, silence hung heavy, broken only by the occasional cry of a frightened servant or the distant echo of hooves against cobblestones. It was the night that changed everything for the Knights Templar. A night that would mark the end of their public power and set the stage for a legend that would echo across centuries. Rumors had spread like wildfire through the cities of Europe. The king's men were coming, and they would take what the Templars had built with sweat, blood, and devotion. In the quiet of the night, knights slept uneasily in their chambers, cloaks pulled tight around shoulders that had carried the weight of crusades and sacred oaths. Their order had been revered, feared even. Kings and popes alike had once sought their counsel, envying the wealth and influence that seemed to grow with every passing year. They were monks and warriors, scholars and soldiers, bound by vows of obedience, chastity, and secrecy. And yet, for all their discipline and preparation, nothing could have readied them for the swift and merciless strike that descended upon them. It began with arrests, sudden and precise, like shadows cutting through the night. Men who had once held command over armies, men who had sworn to protect relics of unimaginable importance, were dragged from their chambers, chained, and thrown into cold, dark dungeons. The world seemed to close in, and for the first time, the Templars faced the terrifying realization that the very institutions they had served could turn against them with ease. The reasons for the purge were numerous and tangled, a web of greed, politics, and fear. King Philip IV of France, known to history as Philip the Fair, had debts he could not repay. He had looked at the Templars' coffers, their vast holdings, their treasure troves, and seen not devotion or piety, but opportunity. Accusations followed swiftly, whispered and then proclaimed. Heresy, blasphemy, corruption, even devil worship. Some of the charges were patently absurd, yet in the climate of fear and ambition, they were enough to justify action. Pope Clement V, caught between loyalty, fear, and political pressure, sanctioned the arrests, lending a veneer of religious authority to what was, at its heart, a calculated theft of power and wealth. The order that had once been untouchable now found itself ensnared in a trap of its own making, or perhaps in a trap laid centuries before, by forces none could fully comprehend. Inside the dungeons, the knights endured torments that would break the strongest of men. They were interrogated, beaten, and pressured to confess to crimes they had never committed. Yet even in the darkness, in the cold and the filth, the Templars' minds remained sharp, their loyalty to their order and its secrets unyielding. It is said that some whispered to one another about relics hidden away, knowledge safeguarded for generations, treasures too dangerous for the eyes of kings. There were those who knew that the end of their public power did not necessarily mean the end of their mission. Even as chains cut into their wrists, even as hunger gnawed at their bellies, some Templars held onto a secret that could survive the wrath of kings, the fear of clergy, and the passage of time. Outside, the cities murmured with confusion and fear. Ordinary people, unaware of the full scale of what was happening, whispered rumors in taverns and marketplaces. Some spoke of knights vanishing like phantoms, others of treasure hidden in distant lands, or ancient scrolls carried away under cover of night. The Templars had been everywhere and nowhere, a presence that could be felt in cathedrals, in monasteries, in trade routes that stretched across Europe and into the Holy Land. And now, as the king's men scoured their holdings and seized their riches, a new story began to emerge. The story of survival, escape, and secrecy. Not all Templars were captured. Some, forewarned or extraordinarily resourceful, slipped through the net. They fled into the night, into forests, mountains, and remote villages, carrying with them what could not be taken. Knowledge, maps, manuscripts, and relics of immense value. These were not treasures of gold and silver alone, though those were taken too. These were treasures of information, secrets that might alter the understanding of history itself. The weight of their flight was enormous. Every step was a gamble between discovery and safety, between the preservation of a sacred mission and the crushing reality of loss. Families, friends, and comrades were left behind, many never to be seen again. And yet, the surviving knights moved with purpose, guided by codes and instructions that had been passed down through the order for generations. They had prepared for this moment, even if the wider world had not realized it. The irony was cruel. The Templars, once the epitome of power and influence, now reduced to fugitives, had become legends in the making. Their fall, brutal and public, created an aura of mystery that has endured to this day. Historians have pieced together fragments of what happened, yet gaps remain, chasms filled only with speculation and rumor. And in those gaps, imagination has always found fertile soil. Tales circulated of knights sailing into unknown lands, of secret vaults hidden in remote monasteries, of alliances with shadowy groups who operated beyond the reach of kings and popes. Some whispered that the Templars' true treasures, those most sacred and dangerous, were never in Europe to begin with, that they had been carried across oceans, perhaps to places no ordinary man could ever reach. It is here that the story begins to take a different turn, one that stretches far beyond the borders of France and Europe. While most of the world believed the Templars' influence had ended, the possibility remained that their knowledge, their mission, and their secrets had survived in silence. They were masters of strategy, of foresight, and above all, of secrecy. Maps are not merely tools of navigation. They are the whispers of those who dared to imagine beyond the horizon. Long before satellites and global surveys, the contours of the world were drawn from the combination of knowledge, speculation, and audacious curiosity. In libraries and private collections across Europe, maps existed that defied the accepted understanding of the time. Lands were sketched that no sailor had officially seen, coasts traced from rumors, seas filled with creatures half real, half imagined. Among these extraordinary maps were a handful that suggested something truly remarkable. A vast land to the far south, beyond the familiar continents, a place cloaked in ice and mystery long before it had been officially charted. These were not the work of casual artists or imaginative monks. Some bore the unmistakable precision of experienced navigators, of men who had traveled farther than anyone cared to admit, and who had recorded their findings with a meticulous hand. The existence of these maps is itself a testament to the Templars' obsession with knowledge. The order was more than a religious and military institution. It was a network of scholars, surveyors, and explorers. While knights in the field carried swords and armor, others carried compasses, sextants, and parchments inked with lines representing currents, winds, and coastlines that official Europe had yet to acknowledge. Some maps were hidden in monasteries, their true meaning encoded in cryptic symbols, while others were carried secretly by knights fleeing persecution, preserved for generations as if the very survival of the order depended on it. The idea that the Templars had access to knowledge of southern lands centuries before mainstream explorers is not merely speculative. It is suggested by the striking similarities between certain medieval depictions and the landmasses that would later be discovered near the Antarctic Circle. One such example can be found in a map known as the Pyre Reis map. Though created after the Templar era, it contains fragments of earlier charts that hint at a deep tradition of secret knowledge passed through generations. Its depiction of southern lands, accurate in ways that should have been impossible for the time, has baffled historians for centuries. It raises questions that are difficult to answer without considering the possibility that some information had survived, hidden within the Order's labyrinthine archives. What if the Templars had not only heard of these lands but had dispatched expeditions to confirm them, long before any European king officially sanctioned a southern voyage? The implications are staggering. It suggests a deliberate effort to safeguard knowledge of a place so remote and inhospitable that it seemed beyond the reach of mankind, a place that could hold secrets worth preserving at any cost. Consider the precision of medieval nautical charts. While many of these maps exaggerated or distorted distant lands for aesthetic or political reasons, certain southern territories appear with remarkable accuracy. The shapes of the coastlines, the placement of islands, even the contours of ice-filled bays, show an understanding of geography that seems improbable given the instruments available at the time. Some historians attribute these anomalies to luck, to hearsay, or to the copying of even older, forgotten maps. Others, however, suggest something far more compelling: that someone somewhere had traveled south, surveyed the land, and returned with knowledge that could not yet be publicly revealed. Within this theory, the Templars emerge as the most plausible candidates. They were explorers, financiers, and navigators with global reach, capable of undertaking voyages that ordinary kings or merchants could not conceive. Yet these maps were dangerous. Knowledge of lands unknown to the public or the crown could confer immense power. A secret southern continent could hide anything: treasures, relics, or even knowledge that might challenge the established order of church and state. For the Templars, who were already under scrutiny and ultimately attacked by kings jealous of their wealth and influence, the protection of such information would have been paramount. It is no wonder that some of these maps were encoded, their true meaning visible only to those who understood the keys of their ciphers, the symbols, and the arcane notations scattered across their margins. One can almost picture the Templars, huddled over parchments by candlelight, tracing lines that would lead them across oceans and centuries, planning journeys whose purpose was as much preservation as discovery. The southern lands depicted on these maps were not merely unknown. They were terrifying. They represented a world of extremes, a land of ice, wind, and unrelenting isolation. Few could survive there, fewer still could thrive. Yet for those who understood the stakes, it offered unparalleled opportunity. An expedition to such a place would have required not only courage but ingenuity, foresight, and secrecy. Ships had to be provisioned for the unimaginable cold. Navigators had to understand winds and currents few had ever encountered, and crews had to be trained for a journey that could last months, even years. Every line on the map was a promise, a warning, and a challenge. A triple weight that only the most committed and capable could bear. What might the Templars have found, if indeed they ventured south? Some speculate relics of civilizations older than Europe itself, artifacts preserved by ice that might reveal knowledge lost to history. Others imagine texts or devices that could challenge conventional understanding of faith, science, or power. There are even whispers of natural phenomena so strange and profound that they inspired fear and reverence in equal measure. Unexplored ice formations that mirrored sacred geometry, magnetic anomalies that baffled compasses, and structures that seemed unmistakably artificial amidst the frozen wilderness. For centuries, all of this remained inaccessible, a secret preserved not only by the difficulty of the land but by the careful concealment of knowledge by those who had ventured there first. And yet, the maps themselves are proof of intention. A line drawn is a line of curiosity. A coastline traced is an acknowledgement of existence. An annotation in the margin is a whisper of discovery. Even centuries later, when explorers finally approached the Antarctic coast, they sometimes reported strange echoes of prior visits. Debris, markings in the snow, unusual arrangements of stone, that hinted at the passage of those who came long before official history recognized it. It is tempting to dismiss these as coincidence, misinterpretation, or legend, yet when considered alongside the cryptic southern maps, they form a pattern that is impossible to ignore. The Templars may have been the first human witnesses to a continent that remained hidden from the rest of the world for centuries, and in doing so, they may have carried with them secrets that continue to elude modern understanding. The human element adds another layer of fascination. Medieval Europe was a place of rigid hierarchy, superstition, and fear of the unknown. Yet within this world, a group of men dared to imagine, and perhaps act upon, the possibility of a southern continent. Their motivations were likely as complex as their methods. Some may have been driven by faith, believing they were guarding divine knowledge or seeking a sanctuary that could protect their order. Others may have been motivated by curiosity, by the desire to push the boundaries of the known world and leave a mark that would outlast their lifetimes. And yet, underlying all motivations, there must have been the recognition of danger. That such knowledge, if revealed too soon, could bring about disaster, for themselves, for Europe, and perhaps for the wider world. In this light, the maps become more than historical curiosities. They are artifacts of ambition, courage, and secrecy. They invite us to question the conventional narrative of exploration, to imagine a hidden history in which the Templars were not merely participants in medieval power struggles but pioneers of knowledge that stretched across continents and centuries. They suggest that even in an era we think of as primitive, men were capable of extraordinary feats of navigation, observation, and preservation. And they hint at a secret continuity. That some knowledge is too precious, too dangerous, to be lost, and so it is carried across generations, encoded in maps, manuscripts, and symbols that wait patiently for those capable of understanding. As we study these maps today, the imagination cannot help but wander. What lay at the end of those southern coastlines? What were the Templars seeking, and what did they find? Were they guided by faith, by secret knowledge, or by the promise of something beyond comprehension? Each line on the parchment seems to beckon us forward, challenging us to follow in their footsteps, to peer into the frozen unknown, and to confront the possibility that history is far richer and far stranger than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe. The southern maps, fragile and faded as they are, endure as a testament to human curiosity and courage. They are evidence that even in an age dominated by kings and clergy, by wars and religious dogma, there existed a group of men willing to defy convention and embrace the unknown. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were not the last to do so. Somewhere, under ice and snow, the lands they charted, the knowledge they safeguarded, and the secrets they carried may still wait, preserved against time and human forgetfulness. ready to whisper their story to those who are willing to look beyond the edge of the world. The Templars were more than warriors. They were keepers of secrets, collectors of knowledge, and navigators of both faith and the unknown. While Europe was consumed by feudal battles, political intrigue, and the brutal realities of the Crusades, the Templars operated in a world that few understood. They moved with purpose, their white cloaks marked by the Red Cross, a symbol of devotion and an emblem that struck fear into enemies. Yet beneath the veneer of devotion and discipline lay a layer of ambition and curiosity that few dared to acknowledge. They were scholars as much as soldiers, accountants as much as crusaders, and in every venture, they sought not only victory but understanding. It was this duality, the combination of faith and insatiable curiosity, that would drive some of them to the most distant, inhospitable places on earth, long before the world recognized them. The Crusades themselves, often viewed as wars of religion and conquest, were also a gateway to knowledge. Every campaign, every siege, and every journey into foreign lands exposed the Templars to cultures, technologies, and histories that Europe had scarcely imagined. They collected maps, manuscripts, and artifacts, carefully cataloging what might be considered trivial by some, yet invaluable to the order. It is said that they developed a network of intelligence, a system so sophisticated that it allowed them to move people and objects across continents with a level of secrecy unmatched in medieval Europe. In this way, the Templars were not merely participants in history. They were architects of it, shaping knowledge, trade, and strategy in ways that are only now coming to light. But their acquisitions were not limited to the known world. Tales persisted of Templars who ventured beyond familiar coasts, who crossed seas and deserts in search of relics and lands hidden from ordinary sight. Some records hint at secret missions, clandestine voyages whose destinations were deliberately obscured from official chronicles. It was not simply gold or land they sought. It was something far more elusive. Perhaps it was the pursuit of relics with profound spiritual significance, or knowledge of ancient civilizations that predated recorded history. Perhaps it was a desire to secure a refuge in a distant, unexplored land, a place where the order could survive should the European powers turn against them. Whatever the motivation, these journeys were perilous, demanding courage, skill, and absolute secrecy. Evidence of these missions appears sporadically, in fragments of letters, in maps hidden within monasteries, and in the coded manuscripts the Templars left behind. One document, almost indecipherable today, references a journey to the lands beyond the ice where the sun touches the horizon and the earth sleeps in white. Scholars have debated the meaning of these words for centuries, some dismissing them as allegorical, others insisting they describe real expeditions into lands uncharted by any official European sailor. If the latter is true, it suggests that the Templars were among the earliest humans to conceptualize a southern continent, perhaps even reaching it long before modern discovery. It also implies that their knowledge was so carefully guarded that only a select few could interpret it, creating a chain of secrecy that would endure for generations. The dangers of such undertakings cannot be overstated. Crossing unknown waters in ships built for temperate climates was a gamble with death at every turn. Storms, treacherous currents, and hidden reefs were constant threats, and yet the Templars' voyages reportedly succeeded where others failed. They understood the patterns of winds and currents, they charted stars for navigation, and they carried supplies and provisions in ways that demonstrated extraordinary foresight. Some historians suggest that they may have even made contact with civilizations or knowledge far older than Europe itself, though the evidence is tantalizingly sparse. What is clear, however, is that the Templars' secret missions combined audacity with intellect, courage with cunning, and ambition with discipline in ways that few other organizations of the time could match. It is in this context that the Antarctic connection begins to take shape. Legends, obscure though they are, speak of knights venturing far to the south, guided by maps and manuscripts known only to the order. These were not casual journeys of exploration. They were deliberate, carefully planned undertakings, aimed at reaching places so remote that they had been erased from the consciousness of Europe. Some accounts suggest that the Templars believed in a sanctuary, a hidden land where knowledge and treasures could be preserved from the greed of kings and the dogma of the Church. If these missions reached their destination, They would have left traces in the form of structures, artifacts, and inscriptions. Yet the harsh climate ensured that only the most resilient of these markers would survive to be discovered centuries later. Human motivation is crucial to understanding these journeys. The Templars were men of faith, bound by vows, yet they were not blind to the worldly forces that shaped Europe. They understood that power, wealth, and influence could be dangerous if concentrated in the hands of the wrong people. Their missions, therefore, were as much about safeguarding knowledge as about exploration. They were moving pieces on a chessboard that spanned continents, thinking in terms of centuries rather than decades. This long-term vision explains why some of their expeditions may have gone unnoticed in the historical record. They were not undertaken for immediate reward but for the preservation of secrets that could endure beyond the Order's apparent fall. In pursuing these missions, the Templars relied on an extraordinary combination of skills. They were skilled navigators, capable of reading the stars and understanding the subtleties of wind and tide. They were engineers and architects, able to construct temporary shelters, secure artifacts, and even create rudimentary signaling systems. They were diplomats and linguists, able to negotiate passage through territories that were politically or culturally hostile. Each expedition was a triumph of planning and execution, a delicate balance between risk and necessity. It is no wonder that the few records that remain are cryptic. To fully reveal the details of these missions would have been to endanger the knowledge itself. Yet even with such preparation, peril was constant. Storms could scatter ships across hundreds of miles of open ocean. Crew members could fall ill or perish in the icy waters. Provisions could run out, leaving men to face starvation in lands devoid of food. It is a testament to the Templars' discipline and foresight that many of these missions appear to have succeeded, at least in part. Some fragments suggest that they reached lands where ice dominated the landscape, where the sun barely touched the horizon during long winters, and where survival required ingenuity and courage beyond what most medieval Europeans could imagine. What did they find in these distant lands? The records offer hints but no definitive answers. Some manuscripts describe landscapes of frozen grandeur, ice formations that resembled cathedrals, and natural phenomena that seemed to carry a sacred geometry. Others speak of objects of unknown origin, relics that may have predated the Templars themselves, and signs of habitation by peoples or civilizations long forgotten. It is impossible to know whether these accounts describe reality, allegory, or a mixture of both, yet they provide a tantalizing glimpse into a world that has largely remained hidden beneath ice and legend. Through these secretive missions, the Templars left a legacy that extends far beyond Europe. Their voyages, if real, predated official exploration by centuries. They demonstrate not only the ambition of a medieval order but also the extraordinary capacity of humans to seek knowledge, to venture into the unknown, and to protect what is valuable, even under extreme risk. It is this combination of courage, intellect, and faith that makes the Templars' southern expeditions so compelling. They are more than historical footnotes. They are a window into a hidden chapter of human endeavor, a testament to the lengths to which men will go to preserve what they deem sacred. And so, as we imagine the Templars setting sail into icy waters, guided by stars and maps, driven by faith and curiosity, we begin to understand the magnitude of what they attempted. Each voyage was a delicate dance between ambition and survival, between secrecy and revelation. A story written not in ink alone but in courage, strategy, and endurance. It is a story that continues to haunt the imagination, one that challenges the boundaries of history and invites us to consider a hidden world beyond the maps we take for granted. A world where the Templars' secrets may still lie waiting beneath ice, untouchable and eternal. Legends have a way of persisting where history falters, of leaving traces in the collective memory long after records have faded or been destroyed. Among the oldest of these tales is that of Ultima Thule, a land whispered about in the sagas of the Norse and carried in the myths of peoples who had ventured to the edges of the known world. It was described as the northernmost of lands, a place of extremes where the sea was ice and snow, where the sun barely touched the horizon for months, and where the boundaries between reality and the divine seemed to blur. The name itself, Thule, became synonymous with the limits of human exploration, a final frontier beyond which lay only the unknown. Yet in these very stories, scattered across time and geography. There emerged hints not just of a northern wilderness but of distant southern lands, mirroring the extremes of the north in frozen mystery, a symmetry that has intrigued scholars for centuries. For the Templars, a secretive order accustomed to blending faith, strategy, and exploration, such legends would have been irresistible. Their entire existence was predicated on seeking out the sacred, the hidden, and the powerful. While most knights were preoccupied with the Crusades and maintaining influence within Europe, the Templars' more visionary members looked to these distant tales as more than stories. They were potential guideposts, hints of lands that could be of unparalleled importance. The idea of a southern Thule, a place at the edge of the world, would have appealed to their strategic and spiritual sensibilities alike. A land untouched by the corruption and politics of Europe, a sanctuary where knowledge, relics, and even people could be preserved, would have been worth any risk, any sacrifice. These myths were often cloaked in symbolism, appearing in sagas as mysterious islands, in maps as faintly sketched coasts, and in oral traditions as lands where the natural order itself seemed different. In the Norse sagas, explorers recounted navigating through endless ice, guided by stars and ancient signs, encountering phenomena that defied explanation. Colossal glaciers, mountains that glimmered with strange light, and ice formations that appeared deliberately shaped, as if by human hands. Some interpreted these tales literally, as accounts of actual voyages, while others saw them as allegorical journeys into the human psyche or metaphors for spiritual challenges. For the Templars, the dual nature of these stories would have been compelling. They were trained to read both the literal and the symbolic, to find practical truth within legend, and to act on knowledge that others dismissed as fantasy. The connection between Ultima Thule and a potential southern land becomes even more intriguing when considering the known ambitions and capabilities of the Templars. They possessed not only the wealth to fund expeditions but also the organizational sophistication to plan and execute them in secrecy. Ships could be provisioned far beyond what ordinary merchants or kings would attempt, and navigators trained in celestial observation could chart courses into unknown waters with remarkable precision. If the Templars believed, even partially, in the existence of a distant southern continent, it is conceivable that some among them would have sought to reach it, guided by legends and cryptic maps that had been passed down within their order. These were men who understood that knowledge was power, and that the greatest discoveries were often concealed from the eyes of the uninitiated. Yet the journey would not have been easy. The sea between known Europe and the frozen southern lands was treacherous beyond imagination. Icebergs drifted silently across the waters, hidden shoals threatened to rip ships apart, and storms of unimaginable ferocity could strike without warning. Crews would have faced hunger, illness, and despair, and yet the Templars' discipline and training would have given them a survival advantage. They were accustomed to hardship, to battle, and to endurance. Every expedition they undertook carried with it the weight of faith and the promise of legacy, a combination that can inspire extraordinary feats of courage. It is this combination of belief, skill, and perseverance that makes the idea of a Templar journey to the southern extremes plausible, even if no official record exists to confirm it. The notion of Ultima Thule as a symbolic mirror of a southern land is equally compelling. In the sagas, Thule was described as remote, sacred, and difficult to survive in, a land that tested those who sought it and rewarded only the worthy. For the Templars, who were trained to endure both physical and spiritual trials, the idea that a southern counterpart might exist would have resonated deeply. It offered both a literal destination and a metaphorical one, a place where the order could continue its mission in secret, where the most dangerous and sacred knowledge could be safeguarded, and where the principles of the Templars could endure beyond the reach of kings, popes, and enemies. Such a vision would have required extraordinary planning, foresight, and secrecy, all of which were hallmarks of the order. There is also evidence, tantalizing though incomplete, that the Templars may have been guided by these very legends in ways that left traces still observable today. Some ancient maps, fragments of manuscripts, and encoded texts hint at knowledge of extreme southern lands, places where ice dominates and survival is a constant challenge. In these documents, symbols are repeated in patterns that suggest both celestial navigation and terrestrial geography, an encoded language of exploration that points to real-world locations. While scholars debate the interpretation of these symbols, one cannot help but notice the striking parallels between the legendary descriptions of Thule and the anomalies observed in the Antarctic region. Ice formations resembling architectural constructs, unusual magnetic phenomena, and evidence of ancient human or pre-human activity. Could these be remnants of the Templars' journeys, traces of expeditions undertaken centuries before any modern explorer set foot on the continent? The human element, as always, is crucial. Legends are rarely simply tales of geography. They are expressions of human desire, fear, and ambition. Ultima Thule represents the edge of possibility, the frontier of understanding. For the Templars, a society steeped in ritual, symbolism, and secrecy, the search for such a land would have been both a spiritual and practical undertaking. The risk of death or failure was immense, but the potential reward, knowledge preserved, relics safeguarded, a sanctuary established, was far greater. Every expedition would have demanded careful preparation, loyal crews, and a readiness to confront the unknown. It is the combination of these qualities, courage, skill, faith, that allows us to imagine Templar knights navigating the icy seas, guided by stars and the faint traces of ancient lore, moving toward a land that was both legend and reality. Legends, maps, and manuscripts are not definitive proof of such a journey, yet their persistence across time is notable. Cultures as distant as the Norse and the Templars, separated by geography and language, seem to converge on the idea of a remote, extreme land that lies at the edge of human reach. The echoes of this idea suggest a shared understanding or awareness of something hidden, something real yet perilous, something worthy of exploration despite the cost. Whether the Templars ever reached the icy southern continent or merely planned to do so, the ambition itself reflects the Order's unique blend of faith, knowledge, and daring, a combination that continues to captivate imaginations today. As we consider Ultima Thule and its possible southern counterpart, we are reminded that history is not always linear. What is dismissed as myth can contain kernels of truth. What is hidden beneath legend may have guided real expeditions. And what is preserved in secrecy may survive centuries of political turmoil, persecution, and human forgetfulness. The Templars operated at the intersection of these forces, using both practical skill and symbolic understanding to navigate a world filled with danger, opportunity, and the unknown. Their engagement with the myths of Ultima Thule is a testament to their vision, suggesting that they saw the edge of the known world not as a limit but as a gateway, a place where knowledge and faith intersected, and where the future could be preserved beyond the reach of kings and popes. In imagining these voyages, the mind conjures a haunting and awe-inspiring vision. Ships cutting through icy waters under pale skies, Templar knights charting paths across seas untraveled by others, carrying treasures, maps, and knowledge meant to endure long after their time. The frozen landscape stretches endlessly, an expanse of white and blue, filled with silent threats and untold wonders. Each creaking mast, each frozen deck, and each star-guided navigation is a testament to courage and foresight, a reflection of an order willing to risk everything in the pursuit of something greater than themselves. And as the legend of Ultima Thule merges with these imagined journeys, we begin to glimpse a narrative that transcends history, one that bridges myth, ambition, and human perseverance in a frozen, timeless wilderness. Even now, centuries later, the echoes of these legends remain. They whisper of distant lands beyond the maps, of knowledge guarded against the world, and of the audacity of those who dared to venture where few could survive. Ultima Thule may have been a northern myth, yet its symbolic power extends southward, suggesting that the edge of the world was never meant to be a boundary but a threshold, a frontier where the extraordinary could exist, hidden from view, waiting for those capable of understanding it. Beneath the frozen expanse of Antarctica, the landscape holds more than ice and snow. It holds whispers of a past that has been concealed for millennia. For centuries, explorers and scientists have been confounded by the continent's anomalies. Towering mountain ranges that seem almost deliberately sculpted, valleys and plateaus hidden beneath thick ice sheets, and geological formations that defy simple explanation. Fossils of trees and plants, discovered in the most unlikely places, hint at a time when this land was not an endless desert of frost but a vibrant, living ecosystem. Even in the age of satellites and advanced surveying, anomalies emerge, magnetic irregularities, unexplained heat signatures, and subsurface formations that suggest the possibility of structures built by intelligent hands. It is within these enigmas that the Templars' possible knowledge begins to take on a startling plausibility. The notion that medieval knights, even the most secretive and resourceful among them, could have been aware of a southern continent seems incredible at first glance. Yet when the pieces are assembled, their obsession with maps, relics, and hidden knowledge, their expansive network of trade and intelligence, their proven ability to undertake long and secretive journeys across hostile lands, the idea becomes less fantastical. The Templars were not content with the visible world. They sought what was hidden, forbidden, or forgotten, believing that certain truths, artifacts, and knowledge were too dangerous or sacred to leave in ordinary hands. If these knights reached even the edges of what we now call Antarctica, they would have encountered a land that both challenged and inspired, a continent seemingly designed to test endurance, faith, and intellect. Archaeological hints, both ancient and modern, suggest that Antarctica may not have been as uninhabitable as we often assume. Fossilized remains of flora and fauna demonstrate that parts of the continent were once temperate, with forests, rivers, and abundant life. Geological formations indicate that sea levels, ice sheets, and climatic conditions have shifted dramatically over millions of years, exposing land that may have been accessible in earlier eras. Some researchers have speculated that ancient civilizations could have existed in these regions, leaving behind artifacts now hidden beneath ice and rock. The idea that the Templars might have possessed fragments of knowledge about these lost civilizations is consistent with their known collection of rare manuscripts and sacred relics, many of which reference civilizations that predated recorded European history. The frozen landscape itself holds eerie patterns that spark both curiosity and speculation. Some mountains bear unnaturally straight ridges or smooth, terrace-like faces. Satellite imagery reveals shapes and formations that, to the trained eye, could resemble the remnants of buildings, walls, or ceremonial platforms. While some scientists argue these are purely natural formations shaped by wind, ice, and tectonic activity, others point out the remarkable precision and symmetry in certain areas. Could it be coincidence? Or is it possible that a human or pre-human presence once altered this land, leaving behind traces that only now, with modern technology, can be glimpsed beneath the ice? The Templars, who were both skilled surveyors and meticulous record-keepers, may have known enough to chart these anomalies, preserving the knowledge in secret until it could be properly interpreted. Beyond the physical evidence, the emotional resonance of these discoveries is profound. Imagine standing on the edge of an ice cliff, staring across a barren white horizon where wind sculpts drifts into towering ridges, and knowing that beneath your feet lies a landscape that has preserved history, knowledge, and possibly human influence for millennia. Every crevasse could hide a chamber, every ridge could conceal a pathway, and every anomaly might be a marker of something far older than the Templars themselves. The human mind is drawn to pattern recognition, to the belief that intelligence and intention underlie the world around us. For the Templars, trained to see both literal and symbolic meaning, the frozen continent would have been a place of awe, fear, and potential revelation, a landscape that demanded reverence and careful study. Some anomalies suggest the presence of structures that challenge conventional timelines. Subsurface radar has revealed formations that could be artificial, geometric layouts buried beneath ice, linear patterns that extend for miles, and depressions that might indicate collapsed chambers or tunnels. These features are located in areas where no permanent human settlement is known to have existed, raising questions about who, if anyone, might have built them. The possibility that the Templars, in their secretive southern missions, were aware of these anomalies cannot be ruled out. They had a history of extraordinary curiosity, the resources to undertake extreme journeys, and the motivation to safeguard knowledge that was too important or dangerous to be left in the wrong hands. The Templars' fascination with relics and sacred sites lends weight to the theory that they might have considered Antarctica significant. They were deeply invested in uncovering artifacts with spiritual or historical importance. Pieces of the True Cross, remnants of ancient manuscripts, and relics believed to hold mystical power. If the Templars had reason to believe that a land at the edge of the world contained similar treasures, knowledge, artifacts, or evidence of advanced civilizations, they would have gone to extraordinary lengths to acquire and protect it. Their entire existence was framed around the preservation and protection of sacred secrets, and their survival depended on their ability to navigate danger, maintain secrecy, and outthink rivals. The emotional stakes of such an undertaking would have been immense. Any expedition to the frozen south would have been perilous. Sub-zero temperatures, unpredictable storms, treacherous ice, and the psychological strain of isolation. Yet it is precisely these challenges that elevate the narrative beyond simple exploration. The Templars were driven not merely by curiosity but by purpose. They sought to safeguard knowledge against the corruption, greed, and short-sightedness of the world above. Every mile crossed in the harshest climates, every artifact preserved beneath layers of ice, every map carefully encoded and hidden, would have been a testament to their dedication and foresight. It was not just a mission. It was a covenant, a silent vow that certain truths would survive even if the order itself appeared defeated. The human mind naturally questions the plausibility of such feats, yet history repeatedly shows that remarkable endeavors often emerge from necessity. Consider the voyages of Marco Polo, Magellan, or Zhang He, explorers who challenged the limits of contemporary knowledge, survived extreme conditions, and returned with information that reshaped civilizations. If individuals can achieve such feats, it is not impossible to imagine that a disciplined, resourceful, and motivated group like the Templars could have navigated extreme southern latitudes, especially if their objective was deemed essential to the survival of knowledge and faith. There is also a profound psychological element to Antarctica itself. The land is not merely cold. It is isolating, silent, and unforgiving. Humans are inherently attuned to sound, movement, and warmth. Yet in this frozen expanse, all familiar cues vanish. For the Templars, this environment would have been simultaneously terrifying and spiritually compelling. The silence allows reflection. The extreme conditions demand courage. The starkness strips away distraction. In such a place, the pursuit of sacred or hidden knowledge would take on a weight and clarity unmatched elsewhere. Every discovery, no matter how small, would resonate with significance. As we piece together the fragments of evidence, the geological anomalies, fossilized life, subsurface structures, and the historical possibility of Templar knowledge, a compelling narrative begins to emerge. Antarctica may not be merely a frozen wasteland. It could be a vault of history, a sanctuary of knowledge, and a repository of secrets preserved by nature itself. If the Templars ventured there, even briefly, they may have recognized its significance, leaving traces of maps, encoded documents, and stories meant to endure across centuries. Their understanding of the land, whether literal or symbolic, would have been extraordinary for their time, and it is a testament to their foresight, courage, and meticulous planning. In imagining their journey, one envisions a landscape of extremes. Towering ice cliffs, sprawling glaciers, hidden valleys, and formations that hint at ancient human or pre-human activity. One can picture knights braving blizzards, navigating ice-choked waters, and leaving behind markers and records to preserve what they found. Every footstep, every observation, and every note would have been an act of devotion and strategy, a calculated effort to safeguard knowledge in the harshest environment on Earth. The frozen continent thus becomes more than a backdrop. It is a character in the story itself, a silent witness to ambition, perseverance, and the unyielding human desire to uncover the hidden truths of the world. The story of human exploration is filled with tales of courage, endurance, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown. Yet few regions have captured the imagination as completely as the southernmost reaches of the Earth. Antarctica, hidden beneath a vast white mantle, remained a mystery for centuries, known only in vague whispers, half-forgotten maps, and speculative accounts. Yet even before the continent was officially documented, explorers and chroniclers reported glimpses of what they believed to be lands far to the south. Ships sailing along the edge of the known world encountered icebergs of unimaginable scale, frigid waters that resisted navigation, and coastal formations that defied the understanding of their time. These early reports were often dismissed as exaggeration, myth, or misinterpretation, yet in hindsight, they suggest that the icy continent was no mere fantasy. Something real, something monumental, lay beyond the familiar horizons, and it beckoned to those bold enough to seek it. The earliest of these hints came from the Age of Discovery, when European sailors ventured into waters that had been largely uncharted for centuries. Explorers like the Portuguese and the Spanish, charting routes around Africa and South America, occasionally reported islands, coastlines, or ice-laden regions that did not correspond with known geography. Many accounts describe towering ice cliffs, frozen seas, and strange phenomena such as icebergs that appeared to move against the currents, or magnetic disturbances that confounded compasses. These anomalies were often dismissed by contemporary authorities as illusions or exaggerations intended to impress sponsors and patrons. Yet among a small, curious circle of navigators and scholars, such reports were treated with fascination, as if the edges of the maps held a promise that extended far beyond the documented world. Legends from sailors' journals speak of islands glimpsed through fog, peaks rising out of ice, and stretches of land where the sun barely touched the horizon for months on end. Some of these accounts were precise, noting latitude and approximate dimensions, while others were fragmentary and veiled in the language of rumor. It is within this mixture of fact and conjecture that the seeds of the Antarctic mystery were sown. The few who documented these voyages recognized that such lands were inhospitable, yet they also sensed that they were guarding secrets, clues to a region uncharted, a world so extreme that only the determined or the desperate could endure it. Even as official expeditions remained limited, whispers circulated that certain medieval orders and secretive groups, such as the Templars, may have possessed knowledge of these regions long before any European crown sanctioned a voyage. The idea seems improbable, almost fantastical, but it is supported by subtle evidence. Maps that hint at southern lands, manuscripts describing icebound regions, and navigational records that suggest voyages to areas unrecorded elsewhere. These hints paint a picture of a world in which the Templars, guided by a combination of faith, curiosity, and intelligence, could have conceptualized the continent long before it entered the annals of recorded exploration. If so, it implies a remarkable continuity of knowledge, preserved in secrecy and passed down through generations. By the 16th and 17th centuries, voyages became more frequent, and the southern seas were charted with increasing accuracy. Explorers such as Gabriel de Castilla and others reported ice-clad lands near the Antarctic peninsula, encountering icebergs so massive they dwarfed their ships. Accounts describe frozen bays, glaciers that thundered and groaned like living creatures, and winds so relentless that crews feared for their survival. These early explorers, often poorly equipped for the extreme cold, documented phenomena that would later be confirmed by modern science. Ice sheets extending for miles, subterranean formations, and evidence that the continent had been shaped by forces far beyond ordinary human comprehension. Yet even these official explorations were hampered by technology, weather, and the sheer scale of the land, leaving much of the continent a mystery. Amid these reports, curious parallels emerge with the stories and legends that had circulated centuries earlier. Sailors noted structures that appeared geometric or unusually regular, formations that some interpreted as remnants of human construction, though skepticism often dominated contemporary analysis. Islands of rock and ice, peculiar magnetic anomalies, and inexplicable heat pockets hinted at something beneath the surface, suggesting that the continent was not merely a barren wasteland but a repository of history and geology that defied easy explanation. In hindsight, these anomalies resonate with theories about ancient civilizations or explorers who may have ventured to these lands in secret, preserving knowledge that would remain hidden until the modern age. The human dimension of these early Antarctic expeditions is striking. Sailors faced relentless cold, storms that could annihilate a ship, and the psychological toll of endless white horizons. They struggled to survive while observing phenomena that challenged their understanding of the world. Many perished, their journals lost to the sea, while others returned with accounts so incredible that they were often dismissed or ignored. Yet those who persevered laid the foundation for centuries of inquiry, mapping coasts, noting ice flows, and recording magnetic and tidal anomalies that would intrigue scientists and historians for generations. Their courage and resilience echo the spirit of those who may have ventured even earlier, guided by secret knowledge or hidden maps. The notion that the Templars could have influenced early knowledge of Antarctica emerges from the interplay of legend, documentation, and analysis. Certain coded manuscripts, obscure references in monastic archives, and marginalia in medieval maps suggest awareness of lands far to the south. Though these references are rarely direct, their cumulative weight points to a sophisticated understanding of geography that exceeded the common knowledge of the time. They imply not only curiosity but also intent, the deliberate recording and safeguarding of information about regions that were inaccessible to the broader world. If the Templars were indeed responsible, their efforts represent a remarkable feat of planning, foresight, and secrecy. The psychological and symbolic significance of the continent would not have been lost on them. Antarctica, with its extreme climate, silence, and vastness, represents both the edge of the world and a place of profound reflection. For men trained to think in terms of strategy, faith, and long-term preservation, the southern land would have been a natural focal point for missions that combined practical objectives with spiritual purpose. It was a place to store knowledge, test endurance, and safeguard treasures too dangerous or sacred to leave in Europe. Even without definitive proof, imagining Templar footsteps across ice-laden terrain inspires a sense of awe and a recognition of their ambition. Every fragment of early exploration adds to the mystery. Ships' logs hint at ice formations resembling walls, unusual magnetic readings, and sudden shifts in weather that seem almost supernatural. These details, recorded centuries before modern scientific surveys, suggest that the continent's anomalies were noticed long before official discovery. Could the Templars have been the first to record such phenomena, passing their observations through coded manuscripts, maps, and oral tradition? If so, their legacy extends beyond Europe, bridging centuries and continents in a hidden narrative of exploration and preservation. Even today, Antarctica continues to reveal evidence of its past. Modern expeditions confirm that ice conceals mountains, valleys, and even traces of ecosystems long extinct. Satellite imaging has detected structures that resemble terraces, tunnels, and geometric formations, sparking debates among scientists and conspiracy theorists alike. The whispers began in cloistered corridors and candlelit chambers, carried on the lips of those who feared both discovery and revelation. Tales of a hidden sanctuary far to the south had circulated among the Templars for generations, so secretive that only the highest-ranking knights were permitted to speak of it openly. The sanctuary was not merely a place of refuge, nor was it simply a repository for treasure or sacred artifacts. It was something more profound, a monastery or fortress sculpted in isolation, built to endure centuries, perhaps millennia, where knowledge could survive untouched by greed, ambition, or the destructive hand of men. Those who guarded the secret believed it to be a sacred trust, a covenant that transcended the earthly life of the order, and even the fall of their public power could not sever it. In the Templar imagination, this place existed at the extreme edges of the world, where land met the endless whiteness of ice and the wind seemed to carry whispers from the divine. They spoke of it in cryptic codes and riddles, leaving traces only for the initiated to follow. Maps were annotated in invisible ink, manuscripts embedded with ciphers, and oral instructions delivered in whispers during the dead of night. The sanctuary was said to lie where sunlight barely touched the horizon, where storms raged with relentless fury, and where survival demanded both physical endurance and spiritual fortitude. To the Templars, it was not only a physical space but a spiritual crucible, a place where faith was tested against the raw power of nature, where the sacred and the perilous coexisted in frozen harmony. Few outsiders have grasped the gravity of such a mission. To leave Europe, to traverse unknown seas and icy lands, is a feat that demands not only skill and courage but vision. The Templars were not merely fleeing persecution. They were executing a carefully considered plan. They carried relics too dangerous to remain in Europe, manuscripts encoding knowledge that could undermine authority or inspire terror if revealed prematurely, and treasures that held historical or spiritual significance beyond mere wealth. Every decision was calculated: the route, the provisions, the secrecy, and the choice of those deemed trustworthy enough to accompany them. Failure could mean death, capture, or the permanent loss of what they sought to protect. Yet the stakes were too high to allow hesitation. The sanctuary itself was often described in allegorical language, a hallmark of Templar communication. Some manuscripts depicted it as a cathedral carved from ice, with towers reaching skyward and chambers hidden beneath glaciers. Others described a monastery of stone and timber, seemingly untouched by time, where the walls held not only the echoes of prayers, but the encoded wisdom of civilizations long lost. The imagery was deliberate, meant to obscure and protect, but for those who knew the keys to the codes, it conveyed vital information about location, structure, and purpose. To the uninitiated, these were mere fictions. To the Templars, they were roadmaps, guides, and warnings, layered with spiritual and practical meaning. The emotional dimension of the sanctuary cannot be understated. For men who had witnessed betrayal, the collapse of their order, and the violent persecution of their brethren, it represented hope, continuity, and survival. It was a promise that their mission was not in vain, that the knowledge and treasures they safeguarded would endure, and that their faith, tested in the crucible of political and religious oppression, could persist in secret. The sanctuary embodied a duality. It was a place of refuge from danger, yet it was also a place of challenge, where endurance, wisdom, and courage were tested to their limits. For those who reached it, the experience would have been transformative, a blend of awe, terror, and spiritual illumination. Modern scholars have speculated about the nature of such a hidden sanctuary, often framing it as myth or exaggeration. Yet the Templars had a track record of extraordinary foresight and strategic planning. They established fortified commanderies across Europe and the Holy Land, managed vast treasuries, and coordinated long-distance missions with remarkable efficiency. If any group of medieval men were capable of imagining and possibly reaching a remote, icebound sanctuary, it was the Templars. Their combination of martial skill, intellectual rigor, and spiritual dedication created a framework in which extraordinary missions could be conceived, planned, and executed with precision. Even the journey itself would have been an ordeal of unimaginable difficulty. Crossing oceans in ships designed for temperate waters, navigating unknown currents and winds, surviving storms capable of destroying entire fleets. Each day was a test of skill, endurance, and faith. Once on land, the frozen landscape presented further challenges. Glaciers, crevasses, blizzards, and temperatures that could kill in moments. Yet the Templars were trained to endure hardship, to persevere under pressure, and to rely on one another in extreme conditions. Every step they took, every decision they made, was guided by the knowledge that failure could mean the permanent loss of their sacred mission, and that success could ensure the survival of secrets that might reshape history. The sanctuary's significance extended beyond mere preservation. It was also a strategic location. Isolated and difficult to access, it offered safety from political and religious rivals, a place where the Templars could continue their work without interference. The remoteness of the southern lands ensured that few could stumble upon their presence accidentally. And yet, the Templars were meticulous in leaving subtle signs for those who would follow, encoded symbols, markers in the environment, and cryptic instructions hidden within manuscripts and relics. In this way, the sanctuary functioned as both a vault and a beacon, protecting knowledge while guiding future generations to it, should they possess the insight and courage to find it. The symbolism of isolation and endurance cannot be overstated. The Templars understood that true knowledge often required sacrifice, that treasures and wisdom of immense value were not freely given, but earned through perseverance, discipline, and faith. The sanctuary, in its frozen grandeur, represented the ultimate test, a place where only those willing to endure could access the hidden truths of the past. To the Templars, it was a microcosm of their order's philosophy, where survival was contingent upon wisdom, courage, and spiritual insight, and where the stakes could not have been higher. Stories passed down through generations suggest that the sanctuary was not empty. Relics, manuscripts, and perhaps even devices of unknown purpose may have been stored there, protected by the natural fortress of ice and the deliberate secrecy of the order. The Templars may have believed that such items held the key to understanding ancient civilizations, divine mysteries, or knowledge too powerful to fall into ordinary hands. The notion that they sought refuge in a land as extreme as Antarctica is consistent with their known methods. They understood the value of isolation for preservation, the strategic advantage of difficult terrain, and the importance of secrecy to protect what was sacred. For centuries, the sanctuary existed only in whispers, encrypted texts, and the imagination of the initiated. Even after the fall of the Templars in Europe, the legend endured. Some knights may have reached the southern sanctuary, while others may have left only cryptic records and maps pointing toward it. The physical traces would have been minimal: markers buried beneath ice, inscriptions carved into stone, or relics stored in hidden chambers. Yet the emotional and symbolic resonance of the sanctuary persisted, a testament to the order's foresight and dedication. It was more than a place. It was a covenant, a promise that certain truths, knowledge, and faith could survive even the collapse of civilizations and the passage of centuries. The modern imagination is drawn irresistibly to the concept. Antarctica, with its white deserts, towering glaciers, and extremes of climate, is not merely a continent. It is a canvas upon which the Templars' ambition, strategy, and devotion can be envisioned. Every ice field, crevasse, and cliff could conceal signs of human endeavor, subtle markers of a civilization or order that dared to reach the furthest edges of the earth. The idea that the Templars may have envisioned, and perhaps even accessed, such a sanctuary transforms the continent from an empty wilderness into a stage for one of history's greatest mysteries. Ultimately, the story of the sanctuary is a story of faith, courage, and vision. It embodies the human desire to seek, to protect, and to endure. For the Templars, the sanctuary was a physical and spiritual refuge, a place where knowledge, artifacts, and sacred truths could survive, hidden beneath ice and secrecy, waiting for those capable of finding them. Its legend challenges us to reconsider the limits of medieval knowledge, the audacity of human ambition, and the enduring power of secrets preserved across centuries. In imagining its frozen halls, its hidden chambers, and the courageous knights who may have traversed its icy terrain, we are drawn into a narrative that is both historical and mythic, both plausible and wondrous. A story that continues to haunt the imagination and beckon the curious to the edge of the world. The sea has always been a threshold between worlds, a place where the known ends and the unknown begins. For the Templars, it was more than a route between ports or a means of transporting soldiers. It was a corridor to secrets, a bridge to lands untouched by ordinary men. In the wake of their order's violent suppression, whispers suggest that a number of knights slipped through the fingers of kings and inquisitors, embarking on voyages that would remain unrecorded by official history. These journeys were not mere escapes. They were carefully plotted expeditions, designed to preserve what could not be left behind. Relics, sacred texts, and knowledge so potent that its exposure might have altered the balance of power across Europe. Ships were provisioned, navigators trained in celestial and magnetic readings, and routes mapped with precision only a secretive, disciplined order could achieve. Every voyage was a gamble with survival, and yet the prize was nothing less than the continuity of the Templars' mission. The Mediterranean, often the starting point for these clandestine expeditions, was a familiar theater of Templar operations. Here, supply chains were secure, contacts reliable, and secrecy attainable. From ports along France, Spain, and Italy, small fleets reportedly set sail under the cover of night, avoiding attention while carrying precious cargo. Among the goods were not only treasure and material wealth but codices, relics, and maps hinting at lands beyond the edge of ordinary comprehension. Some of these maps hinted at southern continents, at icy realms that had yet to be discovered by official European navigation. Others were encoded, their meanings hidden in symbolic geometry or celestial markers that only the initiated could decipher. These voyages required men who were not only skilled in seamanship but also loyal, perceptive, and capable of enduring months at sea under conditions that would crush ordinary sailors. The logistics of such undertakings were staggering. Ships had to carry provisions sufficient for months, or even years, in case unforeseen conditions extended the journey. Crews were trained to anticipate the worst: storms, ice, disease, and scarcity of food. Every sail raised, every tack executed, had to be coordinated with precision, for a single error could result in loss of life or capture, and with it, the secrets entrusted to these men. Some chronicles hint at routes that stretched far beyond known waters, skirting icy capes, threading through islands invisible to official maps, and navigating treacherous currents that could strand a ship or send it crashing into hidden reefs. These were not voyages of chance. They were expeditions guided by intelligence, faith, and an unshakable determination to preserve what the world was not yet ready to know. Whispers of these clandestine missions persisted in maritime lore long after the Templars' suppression. Fishermen and coastal communities spoke of unusual ships seen at the edge of fog banks, vessels that seemed to vanish without a trace. Mariners recorded encounters with strange navigators, cloaked and silent, who avoided ports and paid no heed to trade or custom. Scholars have speculated that some Templar fleets may have reached as far as the southern oceans, guided by maps that incorporated observations from generations past. These maps, often fragmented or deliberately obscured, hinted at icebound lands and magnetic anomalies that would only later be confirmed through modern exploration. For the Templars, such knowledge was not merely academic. It was practical, providing routes, potential refuges, and a means to safeguard precious cargo. The treasures carried by these secret fleets were as varied as they were extraordinary. Some ships held sacred relics, objects venerated for their spiritual significance, possibly including fragments of relics long thought lost or pieces of manuscripts containing forbidden knowledge. Others transported tools, devices, or objects whose purpose was enigmatic, perhaps connected to navigation, astronomy, or early scientific understanding. The nature of what they sought and what they carried remains speculative, yet the stakes are clear. They were guarding items that could destabilize power, challenge orthodoxy, or reveal truths about the world long hidden from the uninitiated. Every mile of ocean crossed was a step toward safeguarding humanity from the premature exposure of dangerous knowledge. Even in the planning stages, the voyages demanded extraordinary foresight. The Templars were masters of logistics, capable of predicting the needs of men, ships, and cargo over extended journeys. Provisions had to include food that could endure months without spoiling. Water supplies had to be carefully rationed, and contingency plans for storms, ice, or disease were essential. Crews had to be loyal beyond question, for the discovery of their mission by outsiders could spell disaster not only for themselves but for the knowledge they carried. Historical references suggest that some expeditions employed intricate signaling systems, both to maintain coordination among ships and to communicate discreetly with allies along hidden coasts. Every voyage was thus a complex operation, blending navigation, intelligence, secrecy, and endurance into a single, high-stakes mission. The southernmost reaches, where ice dominates and storms rage unchecked, posed the greatest challenge. Contemporary accounts of later explorers describe ice cliffs hundreds of feet high, glaciers that groaned with internal movement, and winds capable of overturning even the sturdiest vessels. A Templar fleet venturing into such waters would have faced unimaginable peril, yet the rewards, real or symbolic, were believed to be worth the risk. These regions were not only geographically isolated but spiritually charged. The sheer extremity of the environment would have imbued the journey with significance, testing the resolve, faith, and ingenuity of all aboard. The Templars, trained to endure both physical and spiritual trials, may have seen the harshness of the southern oceans not as an obstacle but as a crucible, refining their purpose and ensuring that only the most steadfast could complete the mission. There is evidence, albeit circumstantial, that some expeditions succeeded in reaching icebound lands. Fragmentary ship logs, coded accounts, and obscure cartographic references hint at discoveries of glaciers, hidden bays, and land formations unknown to ordinary Europe. Some records speak of markers placed on coasts, potentially as signals or guides for future explorers. Others suggest that expeditions established temporary camps or sanctuaries, storing precious cargo in concealed locations, perhaps as a precursor to the southern sanctuaries described in later Templar legends. The combination of secrecy, extreme conditions, and the passage of time has left little tangible proof, yet the pattern of surviving hints and anomalies suggests a methodical effort rather than random voyages. The human experience of such a journey is almost unimaginable. Months at sea, with limited food and water, battling relentless storms, and navigating through ice-choked waters, would test every limit of endurance. Morale would be fragile. Leadership and discipline were essential. Yet these voyages were also profoundly transformative. The isolation of the ocean, the stark beauty of ice and horizon, and the sense of moving into uncharted territory would have imbued the crew with awe and reverence. They were not only guardians of knowledge but witnesses to a world at the edge of human understanding, a realm where nature and mystery converged, and where the courage, faith, and intelligence of a few determined men could shape the course of history. Through these clandestine voyages, the Templars may have established a network of knowledge, shelters, and markers across the southern oceans, linking the known world to hidden continents and icebound sanctuaries. Even if only fragments of these missions succeeded, the legacy is profound. An enduring narrative of human courage, strategic foresight, and the preservation of secrets that might have otherwise been lost. The voyages were more than escape. They were acts of creation, mapping unknown territories, safeguarding knowledge, and establishing a continuity of purpose that would outlast the Templar Order itself. The story of these secret journeys reminds us that history is not always linear, and that the edges of maps often conceal far more than the oceans, lands, and ice suggest. What was once dismissed as myth or speculation may, in fact, be the record of deliberate, courageous, and meticulously planned endeavors. The Templars' clandestine expeditions serve as a testament to human ingenuity, determination, and faith, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge and preservation of the sacred often demands venturing into the most hostile, remote, and mysterious corners of the world. The Templars were guardians of treasures far more enigmatic than gold or silver. While the wealth of their order was legendary, the objects they protected often carried significance that transcended material value. Sacred relics, manuscripts filled with arcane knowledge, and artifacts of mysterious origin were rumored to have been collected across centuries of crusades, pilgrimages, and secret missions. Some of these treasures were openly revered in churches and monasteries, displayed sparingly and with solemn ritual. Others, however, were hidden, encoded, or transported in secrecy, for they were considered too dangerous, too sacred, or too powerful to remain within the reach of ordinary men. Their preservation became a matter not merely of devotion, but of survival, strategy, and foresight. Stories persist of relics that vanished without trace following the purge of the Templars. Objects that had been carefully catalogued and safeguarded were suddenly unaccounted for, their disappearance coinciding with the arrests, trials, and executions that dismantled the order. Among these were sacred items believed to connect directly with the early Christian Church, relics said to possess miraculous properties, and texts that contained knowledge centuries ahead of their time. Some chroniclers hinted at manuscripts written in languages unknown, depicting cosmology, geography, or technology far removed from contemporary understanding. To the Templars, these were not merely curiosities. They were instruments of knowledge and faith, objects whose power could alter the balance of influence across nations if misused or revealed prematurely. It is in this context that the notion of Antarctica as a hiding place takes on a tantalizing weight. The continent, with its extreme isolation and brutal environment, offers a natural fortress, a landscape so hostile that few could approach without extraordinary preparation. In theory, it could serve as the perfect repository for treasures too dangerous or sacred to remain in Europe. Ships carrying relics could have ventured south under cover of secrecy, avoiding patrols, prying eyes, and political interference. The extreme climate would ensure the preservation of delicate manuscripts, artifacts, or even objects of unknown material composition. Ice itself could act as both protector and concealer, locking away objects in a vault inaccessible to all but the most determined and knowledgeable seekers. The emotional stakes of these lost relics are profound. Imagine holding in your hands a fragment of history, a tangible connection to a civilization or faith that shaped the world. For the Templars, the act of hiding such objects was both an act of devotion and defiance. The relics represented continuity of belief, the endurance of sacred knowledge, and a challenge to the forces that sought to erase their order. To transport and safeguard them across oceans, through storms and ice, required not only courage and loyalty, but a profound understanding of the value of secrecy. Every mile traveled, every storm weathered, was an affirmation that these treasures mattered more than life itself. Legends describe specific relics whose fate remains a mystery. Among them are fragments purportedly linked to the true cross, chalices or vessels said to possess sacred properties, and texts containing knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and natural science far advanced for their time. Some suggest that these items were collected deliberately from sites of ancient knowledge, preserved against destruction, and transported to remote locations. The Templars' motivation was not greed but protection, a recognition that the world was not yet ready to confront the implications of what they safeguarded. This lends credence to theories that southern expeditions may have been undertaken to find a sanctuary where such treasures could endure beyond the reach of persecution. The physical nature of Antarctica itself would have been a powerful incentive. Its ice sheets, glaciers, and mountainous terrain create natural concealment, while its extreme climate acts as a deterrent to discovery. Structures built within or upon these frozen landscapes could remain hidden for centuries, preserved almost perfectly by the cold. If the Templars reached these lands, even a temporary shelter or hidden cache would have been sufficient to safeguard their treasures, as the environment itself would deter any pursuers unfamiliar with the harsh conditions. The combination of isolation, difficulty of access, and permanence provided by ice makes the notion of hidden relics more than a romantic idea. It becomes a plausible strategy for protecting knowledge and sacred objects. The logistics of transporting these relics are themselves remarkable. Medieval ships were not designed for long voyages in extreme conditions, yet the Templars were known for their ingenuity. They had experience transporting treasures across continents, securing them in vaults, and coordinating operations that spanned oceans. The care with which they recorded, marked, and concealed important objects suggests a system designed to survive centuries of upheaval. Every journey to remote lands would have been meticulously planned, provisions calculated, routes mapped, and contingencies considered. Their methods combined discipline, intelligence, and faith, reflecting an understanding that the protection of sacred objects was as much about strategy as it was about devotion. Consider the psychological and symbolic dimension of these lost relics. Beyond their tangible value, they embodied continuity, memory, and the endurance of purpose. The Templars, facing eradication and betrayal, understood that the survival of these treasures could serve as a silent testament to their order, a safeguard for future generations to rediscover and learn from. In essence, the relics were not simply objects. They were vessels of legacy, imbued with the collective knowledge, faith, and ambition of a group that had seen itself as the custodian of truths too precious to reveal prematurely. Every effort to conceal, transport, and protect them was a reinforcement of that mission, a pledge that history itself would not be lost even if their order was destroyed. There are tantalizing accounts suggesting that some relics may never have returned to Europe. Reports speak of items transported southward, perhaps as far as lands cloaked in ice and mystery. Cryptic writings hint at storage in natural formations, concealed by ice, rock, or the remote geography of the Antarctic coastline. Whether these accounts are exaggeration, legend, or fragments of truth is impossible to determine with certainty. Yet the possibility remains compelling. The idea that artifacts of immense spiritual, historical, or even scientific value could rest beneath ice sheets, waiting to be rediscovered, transforms our understanding of history. It suggests that the past has been deliberately preserved, hidden from ordinary view, and that human curiosity, ambition, and devotion have operated in realms beyond the conventional narrative. Modern speculation has added further intrigue. Scientists exploring Antarctica have uncovered anomalies in the ice, formations resembling terraces, possible subsurface cavities, and magnetic irregularities that suggest hidden structures. While conventional explanations focus on natural processes, the possibility that some of these anomalies are connected to human intervention, perhaps by those who understood the land long before modern expeditions, cannot be completely dismissed. If the Templars or other secretive groups inspired by their knowledge had established caches or sanctuaries, these anomalies might represent physical traces of their efforts, preserved under layers of ice for centuries. The allure of these hidden treasures is heightened by the combination of mystery, danger, and human ambition. They are symbols of a world in which faith, knowledge, and strategy converge, a world where ordinary assumptions about history are challenged by the extraordinary. Every story of a lost relic, every fragment of a manuscript, and every cryptic reference in medieval texts serves as a reminder that what we think we know is only a fraction of the truth. The Templars' lost artifacts are not just historical curiosities. They are keys to a deeper understanding of ambition, survival, and the lengths to which humans will go to protect what they consider sacred. In imagining these relics hidden beneath ice, one envisions chambers carved in secret, manuscripts sealed against moisture, artifacts preserved against corrosion, and knowledge carefully encoded to survive centuries of neglect or discovery. The isolation of the Antarctic environment, coupled with the deliberate foresight of the Templars, would create conditions under which these treasures could endure almost indefinitely. To the Templars, this would have been the ultimate achievement. A mission carried out in secrecy, in the harshest environment imaginable, ensuring that the fruits of their knowledge and faith would survive long after the world had turned against them. Ultimately, the story of the Templars' lost relics is a story of human ambition, devotion, and foresight. It is a tale that transcends wealth, politics, or military conquest, touching on the profound human desire to preserve knowledge, to safeguard what is sacred, and to endure beyond the constraints of time and circumstance. The possibility that some of these relics now rest beneath the ice of a remote, hostile continent transforms Antarctica from a frozen wasteland into a silent guardian of history, holding secrets that continue to inspire awe, speculation, and a sense of wonder about the endurance of human purpose. Antarctica is a land of extremes, a place where nature imposes its will with an unrelenting severity, shaping landscapes that seem both alien and sublime. Towering ice cliffs rise like walls carved by unseen hands, glaciers groan with a deep, resonant voice, and winds whip across frozen plains with a fury that no human can tame. Yet beyond the stark beauty of snow and ice, there exist anomalies that defy conventional explanation, formations that suggest a presence beyond mere geology. Subtle patterns in the terrain, unusual magnetic readings, and subterranean cavities hint at something hidden, something ancient, that may have survived beneath the ice for centuries or even millennia. For those who seek the unknown, these anomalies are more than curiosity. They are evidence that history is far stranger and deeper than most are willing to believe. Among the most intriguing of these anomalies are geometric formations that, when viewed from above, appear far too regular to be entirely natural. Satellite imagery and aerial surveys have revealed linear ridges, perfectly aligned depressions, and angular shapes that stretch across vast distances. Some researchers suggest that these could be remnants of human construction, perhaps the foundations of settlements, ceremonial sites, or fortifications buried by ice over time. Others caution that natural forces, wind, erosion, and tectonics, can sometimes produce remarkably regular shapes. Yet, when considered alongside the legends of secretive orders, lost civilizations, and Templar expeditions, the possibility that these anomalies were once touched by human hands becomes tantalizing. They hint at a story waiting to be deciphered, a narrative frozen in time and guarded by nature itself. Magnetic anomalies in certain regions of Antarctica add another layer of intrigue. Instruments often behave erratically, compasses swing unpredictably, and unexplained disturbances suggest the presence of metallic or magnetic materials buried deep beneath ice sheets. Some speculate that these anomalies could be the result of natural mineral deposits or the shifting of ice over subterranean formations. Yet others entertain a more provocative idea, that these signals are the residual echoes of structures, objects, or mechanisms placed deliberately to remain hidden. If the Templars or another secretive group reach these lands, they may have utilized such anomalies to safeguard relics, to mark locations, or to encode directions in a manner only decipherable to those with the requisite knowledge. Fossils and remnants of flora and fauna, discovered in unlikely places across the continent, provide further evidence that Antarctica was once far more hospitable than today. Forests, rivers, and complex ecosystems thrived in regions now buried beneath miles of ice. These findings suggest that ancient civilizations, or at least human or pre-human visitors, may have once occupied or traveled through these lands. The notion that Templars could have been aware of this history, even through indirect knowledge or inherited maps, aligns with their known obsession with collecting knowledge and preserving it across centuries. It would explain why secretive missions southward, however fantastical they may seem, were conceivable within the context of their broader strategy. The emotional resonance of these anomalies cannot be overstated. Standing at the edge of a crevasse, gazing across an endless expanse of ice and observing a ridge or depression that seems unnaturally straight, one feels a combination of awe, fear, and curiosity. The human mind searches for pattern, for meaning, for evidence of intelligence in a world that is at once majestic and indifferent. For the Templars, trained to read both literal and symbolic meaning, such landscapes would have been more than obstacles. They would have been part of the narrative itself. Ice, rock, and snow could encode history, serving as markers, hiding places, or conduits of knowledge preserved by the unyielding cold. Every ridge, cavity, or anomaly could be interpreted as a clue, a sign left deliberately or preserved naturally, pointing toward treasures, texts, or sacred relics concealed from the world. Some anomalies appear to suggest subterranean structures. Radar surveys have revealed cavities beneath the ice, vast voids that could be natural formations, yet in some cases exhibit geometric patterns reminiscent of tunnels or chambers. These voids vary in size, with some extending for hundreds of meters and others appearing as complex networks beneath glaciers. Theories abound. Are these remnants of ancient civilizations, natural ice caves, or perhaps vaults deliberately constructed to conceal treasures or knowledge? In light of historical accounts of secretive expeditions, especially those attributed to the Templars, it is tempting to consider that some of these voids may have served as the final resting place for relics or documents deemed too dangerous to leave in Europe. The human imagination is drawn irresistibly to these possibilities. Consider the thought that an order of knights, centuries ago, might have traversed oceans, navigated storms, and endured extreme cold to place objects or markers in a land uncharted by the rest of humanity. Each anomaly becomes more than a geological curiosity. It transforms into a puzzle, a potential link to a hidden history that has eluded discovery. The scale of Antarctica, its remoteness, and the difficulty of access amplify the mystery. What has remained concealed beneath ice and snow may outlast entire civilizations, preserved with a permanence that even the most careful human stewardship cannot achieve. The Templars' known methods of secrecy further reinforce the plausibility of this narrative. They were meticulous record-keepers, using ciphers, coded manuscripts, and hidden symbols to convey information to only those deemed worthy. They understood the power of misdirection, the necessity of hiding critical knowledge, and the virtue of patience. If they undertook southern missions, it is conceivable that anomalies in the ice, linear ridges, unusual depressions, or magnetic disturbances were intentionally incorporated into their navigational and safeguarding strategies. By leveraging the landscape itself, they could conceal objects, mark locations, and ensure that only those with knowledge of the codes and keys could locate the treasures. Ice, in this sense, was both protector and accomplice, a natural guardian of secrets. Reports of unusual formations have persisted over centuries. Sailors, explorers, and scientists have occasionally observed ridges, cliffs, and plateaus that seem to contradict natural expectations. Some formations resemble terraces, others appear as aligned blocks or steps, and still others form networks reminiscent of walls or streets. While natural explanations remain possible, the patterns provoke a question that has long captured the human mind. Could these be remnants of human activity, intentional markings, or evidence of expeditions that predate modern documentation? For those who are attuned to the Templars' history and their obsession with secrecy, the anomalies become more than a question. They become a tantalizing possibility, an invitation to consider that hidden knowledge may have been intentionally preserved. Perhaps most compelling is the combination of historical context, human capability, and environmental suitability. The Templars were uniquely equipped for secretive expeditions, with organizational sophistication, navigational skill, and a philosophy that valued the protection of knowledge above immediate reward. Antarctica, with its extreme climate and isolation, would have been both a challenge and an ideal vault. Anomalies in the ice may have provided natural concealment, navigational markers, or storage opportunities. When viewed in this context, the continent transforms from a frozen wasteland into a potential archive, a place where history, human ambition, and secrecy converge in ways that continue to inspire awe and speculation. Standing at the edge of a frozen ridge, or peering down into a yawning crevasse, one can almost feel the presence of the past. The wind carries an echo of footsteps that may never have been recorded. The ice preserves shapes that challenge interpretation, and the sheer scale of the landscape imparts a sense of reverence. These anomalies are silent, but their silence is profound. They remind us that the world is far older, stranger, and more mysterious than the conventional narrative allows, and that human curiosity, ingenuity, and determination can leave traces even in the harshest and most remote environments. Antarctica, in this light, becomes a character in its own right, a silent, ancient guardian of secrets, preserving what may have been placed or observed there centuries before the first documented explorers arrived. Every ridge, depression, and anomaly is a page in a story that spans generations, continents, and centuries, waiting for the right eyes to read it. The idea that the Templars or other secretive explorers might have interacted with these lands, leaving relics, inscriptions, or markers, transforms our understanding of the frozen continent from a remote wilderness to a stage upon which human ambition, faith, and mystery converge. From the earliest days of medieval mysticism, the Earth itself was imagined as more than a simple sphere, a collection of continents, oceans, and skies. It was seen as a living entity, layered with hidden realms, secret passages, and energies that could only be understood by the initiated. Among the more esoteric theories circulating in secretive circles was the notion of a hollow Earth, a concept that proposed vast, hidden spaces beneath the crust, realms untouched by ordinary human life, yet accessible through passageways known only to those who possessed knowledge, courage, or divine favor. To most, these ideas were dismissed as flights of fancy, allegories of the soul, or metaphors for spiritual exploration. To the Templars, whose lives combined devotion, secrecy, and relentless curiosity, they were potentially literal, a guide to places where the sacred and the forbidden converged. The hollow earth theory, as it was discussed in whispered manuscripts and esoteric texts, described a network of tunnels, caverns, and underground worlds. Some spoke of cities carved into stone, glowing with light from unknown sources, inhabited by beings or civilizations whose origins predated recorded history. Others imagined sanctuaries where knowledge from lost civilizations could be preserved, away from the prying eyes of kings, clergy, and inquisitors. For the Templars, already steeped in a philosophy of guarding what was sacred and dangerous, such accounts would have been irresistible. They were men trained to think in terms of layers, of meaning, of purpose, and of concealment. A world beneath the surface of the earth, especially at the edges of human knowledge, represented not only a physical destination but a symbolic one, a place where truth, faith, and endurance could intersect in a manner beyond comprehension. Speculative maps and encoded texts hint that some Templars believed in the existence of southern entrances to these hidden realms. In manuscripts heavily annotated with celestial markers, cryptic symbols, and geometric diagrams, there are indications of passages leading under ice, mountains, or remote landscapes. The symbols themselves are complex, layered with meaning that could guide initiates to specific locations, or warn the unprepared of dangers beyond the physical. To modern scholars, these documents appear abstract, allegorical, or even absurd. Yet, in the context of Templar knowledge and methodology, they could have served as practical guides for navigating the extremes of the earth, including the icy expanses of the south. The combination of faith, mathematics, and observation was central to their worldview, and a hollow earth, real or imagined, could be read as a literal map, a moral parable, or a combination of both. Legends from beyond the Templar order echo similar themes. Norse sagas spoke of hidden lands at the ends of the world, accessible only through perilous journeys across ice, sea, and stone. Ancient Greek and Roman texts described realms beneath the earth where extraordinary beings or lost knowledge resided, places invisible to ordinary humans but accessible to those deemed worthy. For the Templars, who were trained to see the intersection of faith, history, and practical intelligence, these stories were more than fanciful myths. They were pieces of a larger puzzle, hints of places that might be discovered, explored, and preserved against the corruption of time and human greed. The esoteric frameworks of the medieval world were thus not merely speculative. They could guide real-world action in subtle, concealed ways. The emotional and psychological resonance of hollow earth theory would have been significant. The idea that beneath the frozen, harsh surface of the earth there existed warmth, light, and secret sanctuaries carries profound symbolism. For the Templars, whose order was being dismantled, such a realm offered hope and continuity. Even if Europe had turned against them, even if kings and popes sought to erase their influence, there could exist a domain untouched by human politics. A place where knowledge, relics, and sacred texts could endure. The physical challenge of reaching such a place would mirror the spiritual challenge inherent in their vows. Faith, endurance, courage, and the willingness to face the unknown in order to safeguard the eternal. Some historians suggest that Templar expeditions to the south may have had a dual purpose: to safeguard relics and knowledge and to locate entrances to hidden realms beneath the earth itself. If Antarctica was more than a frozen continent, if it contained caverns, tunnels, or natural formations leading to subterranean spaces, the Templars' journeys take on a radical new significance. These were not merely escapes or safekeeping missions. They were explorations at the intersection of geography, spirituality, and esoteric knowledge. Every observation, every survey, every marker placed in the ice could have served a dual purpose: guiding future seekers and concealing what must remain hidden. Physical anomalies support such speculation. Glaciers conceal valleys and tunnels, ice sheets cover caverns, and underground formations create magnetic disturbances and heat pockets that hint at voids beneath the surface. While modern science seeks to explain these anomalies through geology and glaciology, the possibility that human knowledge or intervention could account for some of these structures remains. If the Templars reached these southern extremes, they may have observed, measured, and recorded these hidden spaces, encoding their discoveries in manuscripts, symbols, and maps designed to endure through centuries of human ignorance. The spiritual implications are equally profound. A hollow earth, or even the notion of hidden subterranean sanctuaries, aligns with Templar philosophy. The concealment of divine knowledge until humanity is ready, the safeguarding of sacred artifacts, and the belief that endurance and faith are prerequisites for revelation. These ideas elevate the frozen, hostile landscapes of Antarctica from a mere physical challenge to a spiritual trial, a place where the human mind confronts extremes, and where physical endurance, courage, and insight are inseparable from the pursuit of truth. Every crevasse, cavern, and ice tunnel becomes not only a possible hiding place but a metaphor for the layers of history and understanding that humanity must navigate. The Templars' use of encoded manuscripts and cryptic instructions would have been essential for such undertakings. Navigational markers, geometric diagrams, and references to celestial bodies could guide those who possessed the keys, while simultaneously ensuring that the uninitiated remained lost. In the context of Antarctica, this method of encoding could transform subtle landscape features, ridges, depressions, or magnetic anomalies, into components of a vast, hidden instruction system. The extreme environment itself would act as both deterrent and safeguard, ensuring that only the prepared and knowledgeable could approach and understand what lay beneath the surface. Legends suggest that some Templars may have reached remote southern regions where ice tunnels, hidden valleys, and underground caverns created natural shelters and vaults. Within these spaces, relics, manuscripts, and possibly tools or artifacts of unknown origin could have been stored. The combination of natural concealment and deliberate planning would have allowed these items to survive centuries, shielded from both human interference and environmental degradation. The symbolism of such a sanctuary aligns with the esoteric belief in hidden knowledge, that truths too powerful for ordinary society should be concealed, preserved, and revealed only to those deemed worthy by skill, courage, and understanding. Ultimately, the idea of hollow earth and hidden realms beneath Antarctica elevates the Templars' southern missions from mere historical speculation to a narrative of profound ambition. These were not accidental discoveries. They were calculated, disciplined explorations, blending geography, esoteric knowledge, and spiritual purpose. The frozen landscapes, anomalies, and subterranean formations of the southernmost continent, may not only represent natural phenomena, but also a record of human curiosity, devotion, and extraordinary foresight. The Templars' legacy, if it extends to these hidden realms, is a testament to the enduring human desire to explore, understand, and protect what is sacred, even in the most extreme and remote corners of the world. Among the many enigmas left behind by the Knights Templar, perhaps the most tantalizing are the manuscripts and codices that survive only in fragments, their meaning obscured by centuries of secrecy. Scholars and cryptographers have long debated their purpose, deciphering the dense ciphers, complex symbolism, and labyrinthine diagrams that fill the pages of these documents. Some suggest that they were manuals of governance, treatises on strategy, or theological reflections. Others contend that they conceal something far more extraordinary: instructions for navigating hidden lands, guidance to locate lost relics, and even secrets that could alter the understanding of history itself. These manuscripts, sometimes referred to in modern parlance as the Codex of Shadows, hint at a knowledge so profound that it demanded concealment from the world at large, a knowledge whose very revelation could have catastrophic consequences if misinterpreted or misused. The Codex of Shadows was far from uniform. Some volumes were small, easily transported, and discreetly passed from hand to hand, while others were large, elaborate, and designed for careful study within secure chambers. They were written in a mixture of languages: Latin, Old French, Greek, and occasionally scripts unknown to modern historians. Symbols overlay words, diagrams interlaced with text, and annotations filled the margins with instructions that appear nonsensical until the proper key is applied. These keys, it is believed, were only comprehensible to those trained within the order, a mechanism to ensure that the secrets contained within could not be revealed to enemies, opportunists, or even the curious who lacked sufficient preparation. Every page was simultaneously a record, a riddle, and a safeguard. One of the most remarkable aspects of these codices is the consistency with which they reference the extreme and remote regions of the world. Despite their medieval origin, the texts contain hints of lands far to the south, areas that were not formally charted until centuries later. References to ice, mountains, and the interplay of celestial bodies suggest that the Templars were recording observations of phenomena that they, or their predecessors, may have encountered directly. The manuscripts do not merely speak of these locations in geographical terms. They imbue them with symbolic meaning, linking physical landscapes with spiritual and mystical concepts. Mountains are described as trials, glaciers as barriers to purity, and icebound valleys as repositories of wisdom and sanctity. In reading the codices, one begins to understand that the Templars saw exploration not merely as a physical journey but as a spiritual endeavor, one in which endurance, insight, and fidelity were tested at every turn. The cryptographic techniques employed in these texts are sophisticated even by modern standards. Letters are replaced with symbols, words interwoven with astrological references, and numerical sequences encode instructions that are meaningless without the proper interpretive framework. Some passages require cross-referencing with other codices, while others demand an understanding of mathematics, astronomy, or natural phenomena. These were not idle exercises. They were deliberate strategies to protect information that, if revealed to the wrong party, could endanger the Templars' mission or the relics they safeguarded. The intellectual rigor required to both produce and interpret such documents reflects the extraordinary combination of scholarly, spiritual, and practical expertise possessed by the order. Historians have long debated whether some of these codices contain practical instructions for expeditions, possibly to remote southern lands. Certain diagrams depict landmasses bordered by ice, intricate networks of rivers or mountains, and celestial markers that could have guided navigation. Marginal notes hint at challenges to be overcome: extreme cold, treacherous currents, and the need for secrecy. Some pages describe placing markers, using natural features as guides, and encoding the locations of treasures or sacred relics. The combination of allegory, geometry, and observation suggests that the codices were intended for action, not merely contemplation. They were maps, manuals, and spiritual guides in one, directing those who were capable of understanding them toward knowledge that few others could access. Beyond their practical utility, these manuscripts were imbued with profound emotional and spiritual significance. The Templars were not merely chroniclers. They were guardians of sacred truths. The texts convey a sense of responsibility, of carrying forward knowledge that could illuminate or destabilize, depending on the hands in which it fell. Some passages reflect anguish, fear, and hope simultaneously, recounting betrayals, losses, and the weight of decisions made under duress. Others emphasize endurance, courage, and the rewards of fidelity, offering encouragement to those who would continue the mission. The manuscripts were, in essence, both a record of past endeavor and a guide for future action, preserving the values, knowledge, and foresight of an order facing extinction. The fragmented nature of these codices only deepens the mystery. Many were destroyed, confiscated, or hidden during the suppression of the order. Others were dispersed across Europe, concealed in monasteries, private collections, or secret libraries. Some pages have surfaced sporadically over the centuries, sparking intrigue and speculation among scholars, collectors, and conspiracy theorists. Even partial decodings reveal astonishing insights. Descriptions of distant lands, navigational instructions based on celestial observation, and references to artifacts whose existence is otherwise unrecorded. The incompleteness of the record has fueled both frustration and fascination, suggesting that only a select few could piece together the entirety of the Templars' hidden knowledge. Modern attempts to decode these manuscripts have yielded tantalizing, though incomplete, results. Cryptographers and historians identify patterns in symbols, recurring geometric motifs, and correlations with astronomical events. Some have suggested that the codices contain instructions for reaching locations that correspond to anomalies in the Antarctic region, descriptions of hidden chambers, or methods for concealing relics in extreme environments. Others emphasize the spiritual dimension, arguing that the manuscripts are as much about inner exploration and enlightenment as they are about practical navigation. The ambiguity, deliberate or otherwise, preserves the aura of mystery, ensuring that the knowledge remains partially concealed even as modern technology allows us to glimpse its outlines. The human aspect of the codices is equally compelling. These were created by individuals who lived under extraordinary pressure, facing persecution, betrayal, and the collapse of the world they knew. The manuscripts are infused with urgency, care, and devotion. They reflect a worldview in which knowledge is both a weapon and a treasure, in which secrecy is a sacred obligation, and in which survival is intertwined with moral, spiritual, and intellectual responsibility. Every symbol, diagram, and marginal note carries the weight of centuries of tradition, experience, and foresight. For the Templars, the act of recording and concealing knowledge was itself a sacred duty, one that required meticulous attention to detail, discipline, and trust in those who would follow. The Codex of Shadows, in particular, stands as a testament to the interplay of secrecy, ambition, and vision. It embodies the idea that knowledge is not merely to be acquired, but to be safeguarded, interpreted, and transmitted responsibly. Its very structure, fragmented, encoded, multilayered, reflects the complexity of the Templars' mission and the sophistication of their intellect. Each page, each symbol, each diagram is both a challenge and a promise. For those who understand, it offers guidance, revelation, and the opportunity to uncover truths long concealed. For those who cannot, it remains indecipherable, a silent guardian of secrets that history has yet to fully reveal. The allure of these manuscripts lies not only in their content but in their implication, that the Templars may have reached further, understood more, and safeguarded knowledge of far greater significance than traditional history acknowledges. If even fragments hint at southern expeditions, hidden sanctuaries, or advanced understanding of geography and celestial phenomena, the full scope of what was preserved remains one of the great mysteries of human history. The codices are, in essence, a bridge between the past and the possibilities of discovery, a record of ambition, faith, and intellectual courage preserved in a form designed to endure beyond the reach of time and human interference. The ice of Antarctica is not merely a frozen expanse. It is a landscape of haunting beauty and profound mystery, sculpted by time, wind, and hidden forces that seem to defy ordinary comprehension. Glaciers extend like rivers of glass, crests glinting in the faint sunlight, while frozen cliffs rise abruptly, casting long, shifting shadows across the endless white plains. Amid the stark, otherworldly terrain, reports and legends speak of structures that resemble temples or cathedrals carved from the ice itself, monumental works that merge natural grandeur with an almost architectural symmetry. These formations are often invisible at first glance, revealed only to those who approach with care, observation, and perhaps a mind attuned to patterns that lie beyond ordinary perception. They are silent, enduring, and imbued with a sense of purpose that challenges the notion of Antarctica as a barren wasteland. Observers have noted that certain ice ridges and formations bear geometric precision, as if shaped by intent rather than chance. Towering spires, terraces, and arch-like depressions create shadows and reflections that suggest design, rhythm, and proportion. Some formations are aligned with celestial markers, with sunlight and shadow interacting in ways that imply awareness of solar angles or seasonal cycles. For modern explorers and scientists, these phenomena can be explained as natural sculpting by wind, frost, and ice movement, yet the suggestion of deliberate structure, particularly in remote regions untouched by human hands in recorded history, cannot be dismissed outright. The possibility that such formations were observed, studied, or even enhanced by secretive explorers, like the Templars, adds a layer of intrigue that intertwines nature with human intent, legend, and ambition. In the context of the Templars, the notion of ice-carved cathedrals carries profound symbolic significance. The order was deeply spiritual, and their architecture in Europe reflected a meticulous attention to geometry, proportion, and sacred symbolism. Cathedrals were designed not only as places of worship, but as manifestations of divine order, physical embodiments of faith and knowledge. To imagine similar structures in Antarctica, whether entirely natural or augmented by human hands, is to consider the Templars' philosophy applied to a remote, hostile, and extreme environment. These ice formations could have been interpreted as sacred, offering both a physical and spiritual arena for meditation, preservation, and reflection. Some accounts describe internal features within these formations: chambers or caverns carved into ice walls, terraces that could support temporary habitation, and alcoves that might serve as storage for relics, manuscripts, or other valuable objects. Explorers recount that echoing chambers amplify sound in unusual ways, and that ice corridors sometimes seem to guide movement, naturally or intentionally, toward central spaces or focal points. If the Templars or other secretive groups reached these areas, it is conceivable that they recognized and exploited these natural formations, converting them into temporary sanctuaries or repositories. The combination of isolation, difficulty of access, and natural preservation offered by the ice would have created an unparalleled protective environment, ideal for safeguarding objects or knowledge too valuable to risk elsewhere. The emotional and psychological impact of encountering such ice-carved cathedrals cannot be overstated. In the harsh, unforgiving Antarctic environment, any structure that appears deliberate carries immense weight. Walking among towering spires, traversing shadowed corridors of ice, or entering naturally enclosed chambers evokes awe, fear, and reverence. The scale of the formations dwarfs the human figure, emphasizing the vulnerability of individuals against the vastness of nature. Yet there is also a sense of purpose, of hidden order amidst chaos, that inspires curiosity and determination. For explorers in the footsteps of the Templars, these formations could represent both a sanctuary and a test, a place where endurance, observation, and faith converge. The alignment of some ice formations with celestial events is particularly striking. Certain ridges, depressions, and ice cliffs appear positioned to interact with sunlight at solstices, casting shadows or illuminating specific areas at precise times of the year. While this may be a natural coincidence, it mirrors the Templars' architectural practices in Europe, where churches and sacred sites often incorporated astronomical alignment as a form of symbolic and practical knowledge. The parallels suggest that the order, familiar with celestial observation, may have recognized significance in natural formations, interpreting them through the lens of spiritual symbolism, navigation, or preservation. It is not difficult to imagine that they would leave markers, annotations, or subtle enhancements to reinforce meaning for those initiated into their secrets. Beyond symbolism, these ice cathedrals may have had practical applications. Alcoves and enclosed chambers could serve as shelters against storms, caches for provisions, or concealed storage for relics and manuscripts. The extremely low temperatures of Antarctica would preserve organic and inorganic materials for centuries, creating natural refrigeration and protection from decay. For a group seeking to safeguard knowledge and sacred objects, such an environment would be ideal. The landscape itself, imposing and perilous, would deter discovery by ordinary travelers, ensuring that only those equipped with knowledge, skill, and courage could access its secrets. In this sense, the ice formations function as both guardians and facilitators, protecting treasures while guiding those who know how to interpret the terrain. Legends hint at more than physical structures. Some manuscripts describe rituals performed within or around these natural cathedrals, ceremonies designed to consecrate space, preserve knowledge, or enhance spiritual understanding. Whether these rituals were symbolic or practical remains unclear, but they emphasize the integration of human action with natural features. The Templars' attention to detail, reverence for sacred geometry, and understanding of the symbolic power of space would have made such sites ideal for contemplative or ceremonial activity. In this way, the ice cathedrals are not merely formations. They are stages for human experience, blending environment, belief, and purpose into a unified whole. The isolation of Antarctica amplifies the mystery. Unlike Europe or the Middle East, where human activity leaves abundant traces, the southern continent is unforgiving. Storms, shifting ice, and extreme cold erase footprints, collapse temporary shelters, and conceal evidence beneath layers of frost. This makes the discovery of any formation resembling a cathedral or temple all the more remarkable. It also reinforces the plausibility of these locations being used as secret repositories or sanctuaries. For those with knowledge of the terrain or the coded instructions from surviving Templar manuscripts, the landscape itself provides security, obscuring presence while preserving what is stored or observed. Consider the psychological effect on later explorers encountering these formations. Imagine trekking across endless ice fields, navigating treacherous crevasses, and suddenly glimpsing spires and ridges that suggest design, proportion, and intent. The encounter inspires wonder and fear simultaneously, a visceral response that blends awe with the realization that the land is not merely inert. It may be a silent record of human presence, intention, and ambition. These ice-carved cathedrals serve as a bridge between nature and human endeavor, challenging conventional understanding and inviting speculation about those who came before, those who recognized patterns, and those who sought to leave traces for generations yet unborn. The legend of the ice cathedrals persists because they exist at the intersection of human imagination, natural extremity, and historical possibility. They are monuments without builders, sacred spaces without temples, and narratives frozen into the landscape. The suggestion that the Templars may have encountered, used, or even subtly enhanced these formations transforms Antarctica into a landscape of both history and myth, a place where the past, present, and imagination converge. For historians, explorers, and enthusiasts, they represent the tantalizing possibility that humanity's reach, ambition, and reverence for knowledge extended farther than previously believed, touching even the coldest and most isolated corners of the world. In imagining these frozen cathedrals, one envisions corridors of ice echoing with wind, spires catching faint light, and chambers that may have sheltered the sacred or preserved knowledge long thought lost. They are reminders that the world is layered with mystery, that even the harshest environments may conceal purpose, and that human ambition can leave traces in places seemingly inhospitable or impossible. The Templars' possible engagement with these formations reflects a convergence of faith, intelligence, and endurance, creating a narrative that resonates across time, one in which exploration, secrecy, and the preservation of the sacred coexist in the most extreme and beautiful landscapes imaginable. The idea of sanctuary has always held a particular fascination for the human imagination, a place where the outside world cannot intrude, where what is sacred or dangerous may be preserved, and where time itself seems to slow in deference to purpose. For the Templars, who had experienced betrayal, persecution, and the violent dissolution of their order, the concept of sanctuary was more than abstract. It was a necessity. In the midst of political upheaval and royal hostility, they sought locations where their knowledge, relics, and sacred objects could survive beyond the reach of kings, popes, and inquisitors. Antarctica, with its extreme isolation, hostile climate, and vast expanses of ice, offered precisely the kind of environment in which such a sanctuary could exist undisturbed. Here, the frozen land itself could act as a protector, ensuring that only those with sufficient knowledge, skill, and courage could access its secrets. The notion of an Antarctic covenant, a hidden agreement between the Templars and the land itself, as if nature and order conspired to safeguard the sacred, has persisted in whispers, manuscripts, and speculation. Some codices reference lands beyond the frost, valleys untouched by man, and hollows where knowledge endures. These texts, layered with symbolism and encoded instructions, suggest deliberate intent. The Templars were not merely fleeing persecution or hiding treasures. They were establishing a long-term network of sanctuaries, carefully mapped, provisioned, and concealed. The covenant was both physical and spiritual, a promise to protect the sacred, a strategy to ensure survival, and a recognition that the Order's mission could outlive the collapse of its European presence. The logistics of establishing such sanctuaries would have been staggering. Ships capable of long voyages, trained crews familiar with celestial navigation and extreme conditions, and a systematic approach to supply, shelter, and security would have been essential. Routes had to be charted through treacherous waters, over ice-choked seas, and into regions of the continent where survival depended upon foresight and discipline. Camps, caches, or temporary structures would need to withstand storms, ice movement, and the relentless forces of nature. The Templars, with their history of fortified commanderies, complex supply networks, and meticulous record-keeping, were uniquely suited for such an undertaking. Every element of the journey and every aspect of the sanctuary would have been planned with extraordinary care, reflecting a synthesis of strategy, faith, and endurance that few other medieval orders could achieve. Once established, these sanctuaries would have served multiple purposes. Physical protection of relics and manuscripts was one, shelter for explorers and messengers another. But beyond the tangible, they offered a space for contemplation, ritual, and the preservation of sacred knowledge. The isolation imposed by the Antarctic environment amplified their spiritual significance. Here, away from the corruption, politics, and distractions of Europe, the Templars could continue their work, safeguard their treasures, and preserve their understanding of history, science, and theology. Every ice-choked valley, every hidden cavern, and every isolated plateau became both vault and cathedral, a space where human endeavor met the raw power of nature in a symphony of endurance and purpose. The psychological dimension of such sanctuaries is profound. Survival in Antarctica is a test of body, mind, and spirit. Extreme cold, fierce storms, and the constant threat of isolation demand not only physical endurance but focus, resilience, and determination. For the Templars, the establishment of hidden colonies or sanctuaries would have been a continuation of their philosophy. That true knowledge, sacred treasures, and spiritual insight are not preserved through ease or comfort, but through struggle, vigilance, and careful stewardship. To live in proximity to these hidden places, to maintain them, and to safeguard their contents, would have required the utmost dedication and unwavering loyalty. Some manuscripts hint at the methods the Templars might have employed to conceal and protect their Antarctic sanctuaries. Natural formations, ice cliffs, glaciers, and crevasses were integrated into the design of hiding places. Caverns and depressions could serve as storage for manuscripts, artifacts, and provisions, while surface features provided camouflage against casual observation or accidental discovery. Symbols etched in ice or stone could encode directions or warnings for those capable of interpretation, while storms and treacherous terrain acted as natural deterrents to the uninitiated. The combination of environmental features, encoded knowledge, and disciplined guardianship created a sanctuary that was virtually impenetrable, both protecting the sacred and guiding those prepared to approach it with understanding and reverence. The concept of hidden colonies implies a network rather than a single location. Multiple sanctuaries, each serving distinct functions, may have been established across Antarctica's ice fields and mountain ranges. Some may have been temporary, established for storage and observation, while others were intended for longer-term habitation, allowing for the maintenance of archives and relics. The Templars' ability to coordinate across long distances, their understanding of supply, and their meticulous planning suggest that these colonies could have been mutually reinforcing, with movement and communication between them enabling a decentralized yet resilient system. In this model, the Antarctic continent itself becomes a fortress, its natural harshness leveraged as both defense and preservation. The emotional resonance of this idea cannot be overstated. A sanctuary in Antarctica is not merely a hiding place. It is a testament to human foresight, courage, and devotion. It embodies the belief that knowledge, faith, and purpose can endure even in the face of annihilation. The Templars, whose order was dismantled through violence and political machination, understood that the preservation of sacred objects, texts, and traditions required extraordinary measures. By creating sanctuaries in the most inhospitable environment on Earth, they ensured that the essence of their mission, faith, knowledge, and guardianship could survive beyond the immediate threats of kings, inquisitors, and time itself. The practical challenges of maintaining such colonies would have been immense. Shelter from storms, access to fresh water, storage for food, and protection of manuscripts and artifacts against extreme cold would all require ingenuity. The Templars were not unprepared for this. Their European commanderies demonstrate an extraordinary understanding of logistics, architecture, and security, suggesting that similar principles could be applied in a far more extreme environment. Ice caves, natural shelters, and the strategic positioning of caches could create a network of sites resilient to both human and environmental threats. Every decision would reflect a balance between secrecy, preservation, and accessibility for those entrusted with the Order's mission. Isolation amplified the sanctuary's symbolic power. In a landscape where wind howls across endless white plains and visibility can be reduced to mere meters and moments, the human spirit is tested. In such an environment, every act of preservation, every careful measurement, and every ritual or observation carries profound weight. The Templars may have viewed the Antarctic sanctuaries as not merely defensive measures, but as spiritual crucibles where devotion, discipline, and endurance were as important as the relics themselves. Survival and safeguarding became intertwined, creating a narrative in which the land, the ice, and the human effort together preserved the sacred against the encroachment of time and human folly. Ultimately, the Antarctic sanctuaries, conceived as hidden colonies, repositories, and spiritual sites, represent the convergence of human ambition, faith, and strategy. They are physical manifestations of the Templars' dedication to preservation, secrecy, and endurance. They combine natural extremity with human foresight, environmental harshness with architectural or symbolic intention, and isolation with purpose. The legend of these sanctuaries persists not only because of the possibility of hidden relics or knowledge, but because they embody the human drive to protect what is sacred, to endure beyond the immediate constraints of circumstance, and to create legacies that transcend time, politics, and geography. The Templars were not merely warriors and monks. They were pioneers of ingenuity, blending martial prowess with intellectual rigor, scientific curiosity, and unparalleled organizational skill. Beyond their castles, their commanderies, and their vaults, they cultivated knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and navigation that exceeded the understanding of most of medieval Europe. Their travels during the Crusades and other secret missions demanded innovation, precision, and adaptability, for survival and success often depended upon tools, methods, and instruments that were at the forefront of contemporary knowledge. These skills, honed over decades of exploration and conflict, would have been invaluable in conceiving and executing expeditions to the most remote and unforgiving corners of the globe, including the icy expanse of the Antarctic continent. Among the most extraordinary aspects of Templar technology was their mastery of navigation. In an age before chronometers, GPS, or reliable longitudinal calculation, they relied on a combination of celestial observation, rudimentary instruments, and carefully encoded maps. Sextants, astrolabes, and early compasses were employed with precision, often enhanced by knowledge passed down from scholars in the Holy Land and other distant regions. These instruments were not mere tools. They were extensions of intellect, allowing the Templars to traverse seas, deserts, and mountains with a level of accuracy that astonishes historians today. In the context of southern voyages, where ice-laden waters, magnetic anomalies, and extreme weather prevailed, such expertise would have been indispensable. Each measurement, each calculation, could mean the difference between reaching a hidden sanctuary and perishing in a frozen wasteland. Their knowledge of materials and engineering was equally sophisticated. Ships, for example, were not built simply for transport but designed for resilience, speed, and adaptability. Hulls were reinforced, sails optimized for varied wind conditions, and provisions carefully calculated to endure months at sea. Some accounts hint at modifications that would allow vessels to withstand encounters with icebergs, storm surges, and long-term exposure to frigid waters. Tools and instruments were constructed with longevity in mind, ensuring that compasses, sextants, and celestial charts remained functional even in harsh climates. The Templars' approach to technology was holistic. Every element, from ship design to food preservation, was integrated into a system that prioritized endurance, secrecy, and efficiency. Cryptography and encoding also played a critical role. Templar maps and manuscripts often contained layers of hidden information, with symbols and annotations that could only be deciphered by those trained in the Order's unique codes. This knowledge was essential not only for protecting secrets from enemies but also for ensuring safe navigation in unfamiliar or dangerous territories. In the Antarctic context, encoded instructions could guide travelers through ice-choked waters, identify natural shelters, or mark locations of hidden caches and sanctuaries. The combination of encoded information, celestial navigation, and environmental awareness created a level of strategic sophistication rarely appreciated in discussions of medieval exploration. Some manuscripts suggest that the Templars possessed instruments designed for detecting anomalies in the landscape, understanding magnetic variations, or even anticipating natural phenomena. While the details are obscured by time and secrecy, references to devices of insight, tools to read the unseen, and instruments aligned with heaven and earth imply a depth of technological and scientific understanding that extended beyond ordinary medieval knowledge. In an Antarctic setting, such instruments would have been crucial. Magnetic anomalies, hidden ice caverns, shifting glaciers, and unpredictable weather patterns demanded the ability to observe, measure, and predict with precision. A Templar equipped with such devices could navigate not merely by sight or intuition, but by understanding the forces and patterns underlying the extreme environment. The combination of practical and esoteric knowledge is central to understanding the Templars' approach. Instruments were not used solely for measurement. They were also integrated into a broader philosophy of observation and interpretation. Celestial readings were tied to calendars, ritual cycles, and encoded instructions. Patterns in the landscape were interpreted as both practical guides and symbolic markers, pointing to hidden sanctuaries or indicating locations where relics or knowledge could be safely stored. In this way, technology was inseparable from faith and strategy, blending the spiritual, intellectual, and practical into a unified system of exploration and preservation. The idea that the Templars may have developed or employed technologies specific to Antarctic expeditions is supported by their history of adaptation and innovation. Across Europe and the Holy Land, they confronted extreme conditions, political hostility, and logistical challenges. Each problem demanded a solution, and the Order's ability to innovate was legendary. It is therefore conceivable that when faced with the prospect of reaching and operating within a frozen, remote continent, they applied their knowledge creatively, designing shelters to withstand storms, constructing storage facilities resistant to decay, and using instruments calibrated to detect anomalies in ice and magnetic fields. In this way, technology became both an extension of human capability and a form of protection, ensuring that knowledge, relics, and missions could endure in environments hostile to ordinary survival. The psychological impact of these tools and methods should not be underestimated. For men navigating an uncharted, frozen world, the ability to measure, calculate, and interpret the environment would instill confidence and structure. Ice, storms, and isolation create profound psychological stress. Survival depends as much on mental resilience as on physical strength. Templar instruments, Maps and encoded knowledge provided not only practical guidance but a framework of order, enabling explorers to anticipate hazards, identify safe routes, and maintain discipline. Every measurement taken, every celestial calculation performed, reinforced the sense that the expedition was guided, purposeful, and achievable, even in an environment that seemed designed to overwhelm the unprepared. In addition to navigation, Templar technology may have included methods for observation and preservation. Manuscripts reference devices for storing texts and relics safely, for measuring environmental conditions, and for recording observations with precision. These tools suggest a level of foresight that is remarkable. Anticipating extreme conditions, planning for extended isolation, and ensuring that knowledge and artifacts could survive even if human caretakers did not. In the Antarctic context, such technology would have been critical, enabling the establishment and maintenance of sanctuaries, the concealment of relics, and the accurate recording of observations that might guide future generations. The integration of technology, knowledge, and secrecy reflects the Templars' holistic approach to their missions. Exploration, preservation, and spiritual purpose were intertwined. Instruments were not simply tools, they were extensions of the mind, amplifying the capacity to observe, interpret, and act in ways that ordinary men could not. Maps encoded with hidden routes, compasses calibrated to detect anomalies, and manuscripts containing multilayered instructions formed a network of understanding that enabled the Templars to operate in environments as extreme as the Antarctic with a level of sophistication unparalleled in medieval Europe. Ultimately, the story of Templar technology is a story of foresight, ingenuity, and the pursuit of mastery in a hostile world. It demonstrates that their influence extended far beyond Europe, into realms that would test endurance, intellect, and faith simultaneously. Instruments and methods designed to navigate, measure, and interpret extreme conditions were not mere conveniences. They were essential tools in the preservation of knowledge, relics, and sacred truths. In the vast, frozen expanse of the Antarctic, these innovations would have transformed the landscape from a barren wasteland into a domain navigable, interpretable, and preservable, offering both practical guidance and spiritual resonance for those who dared to venture into the unknown. The Antarctic landscape, in its desolate and frozen grandeur, has always been a magnet for speculation, curiosity, and the imagination of those who seek the extraordinary. Among the most compelling theories is the notion that relics of immense spiritual and historical significance, long hidden from the world, may lie concealed beneath its ice. For the Templars, whose existence was intertwined with sacred objects, arcane knowledge, and the preservation of truths deemed too dangerous for ordinary eyes, the continent would have offered the ultimate refuge. Its isolation, extreme conditions, and formidable terrain created a natural vault, one that could protect relics from both human interference and the passage of time. The possibility that some of the Templars' most treasured artifacts were transported here, deliberately hidden, and perhaps even ritualistically secured, adds an extraordinary layer to the mystery of the frozen continent. The nature of these relics is the subject of intense speculation. Historical records and fragments of Templar manuscripts hint at objects of immense sacred value. Fragments of the true cross, vials of consecrated blood, manuscripts containing lost knowledge of early civilizations, and tools used for navigation, astronomy, or ritual that surpassed the technological understanding of their era. Some accounts suggest that these objects were not merely symbols of faith but instruments of knowledge, repositories of wisdom that could alter the perception of history, religion, or science. The Templars were aware of the stakes. They understood that the possession of such objects conferred power, but also danger. Their concealment in the most remote corners of the world, protected by both secrecy and extreme geography, reflects a strategy born of foresight, necessity, and devotion. The process of transporting these relics to Antarctic sanctuaries would have required extraordinary planning. Ships capable of surviving extreme conditions, crews trained in endurance and secrecy, and the ability to navigate uncharted waters were prerequisites. The Templars were uniquely qualified for such undertakings, having long combined military, logistical, and navigational expertise. Their operations were precise, deliberate, and secretive, designed to outmaneuver both natural and human threats. Every step of the journey would have been calculated, from supply chains to concealed storage on board, from encoded maps to the use of celestial observation to navigate southern latitudes. The success of such missions, even if partial or intermittent, speaks to the exceptional capacity of the order to combine intellect, faith, and daring. Once on the continent, the relics would have required protection from the environment itself. Antarctica is a land of extremes. Temperatures can plunge to lethal lows, storms strike with little warning, and ice and snow reshape the terrain continuously. Yet this harshness also offers preservation. Ice shields against decay, frost prevents the deterioration of organic materials, and isolation safeguards against human interference. It is conceivable that the Templars, understanding these natural advantages, selected specific locations, caverns, crevasses, or natural shelters, where relics could be concealed with a combination of natural protection and deliberate marking for those who would return. These sanctuaries would have been designed to endure, offering both concealment and continuity for generations of guardians, or even leaving clues for those who understood the encoded maps and manuscripts. Some reports suggest that the relics were not simply hidden for preservation, but ritualistically consecrated within the icebound sanctuaries. Certain manuscripts describe ceremonial arrangements, placements that align with celestial events, and inscriptions or symbols carved into ice or rock. These rituals were not mere superstition. They were expressions of the Templars' understanding of the sacred, a deliberate act of sanctifying the environment and protecting the relics within it. In a land where survival is itself a test of skill and faith, the consecration of these spaces adds a spiritual dimension, transforming the Antarctic landscape into a living cathedral, where the elements themselves become guardians of history, faith, and knowledge. The potential significance of these relics extends beyond faith. Many accounts suggest that some objects may contain knowledge lost to the broader world. Manuscripts encoded with information about astronomy, navigation, and natural phenomena suggest that the Templars had access to insights far ahead of their time. Relics could have served as keys to understanding the natural world, guiding exploration, or preserving wisdom that would otherwise have been lost. The deliberate concealment of such objects in Antarctica, combined with encoded instructions and carefully chosen locations, implies a strategy that is both practical and visionary. It is not merely a story of hiding. It is a narrative of safeguarding civilization itself, using extreme geography and secrecy as tools of preservation. Modern explorers and researchers have occasionally reported anomalies that suggest hidden artifacts or structures beneath the ice. Magnetic disturbances, unusual subsurface formations, and geometrically regular cavities hint at the possibility of human intervention. While many of these findings can be explained by natural phenomena, the alignment with Templar legends, encoded manuscripts, and historical reports invite speculation. Could these anomalies be the remnants of caches, vaults, or even temporary shelters established to store relics? The Antarctic environment, with its preservation qualities, would make it an ideal repository, maintaining both organic and inorganic artifacts in near-pristine condition for centuries, if not millennia. The human dimension of these relics is as compelling as the physical. They were entrusted to an order whose very existence demanded discipline, loyalty, and secrecy. Guardians would have been selected with care, trained to navigate extreme conditions, and initiated into the codes and ciphers that reveal the locations of these treasures. The act of safeguarding was not merely logistical. It was an expression of devotion, intelligence, and moral responsibility. The relics were not left unattended. They were cared for, monitored, and protected, integrated into a broader strategy of preservation that combined environmental advantage, encoded knowledge, and human oversight. The emotional weight of these relics, hidden beneath a frozen, unforgiving landscape, cannot be overstated. They represent continuity in the face of annihilation, the endurance of sacred knowledge in defiance of persecution, and the foresight of those who recognize the fragility of human institutions. To imagine the Templars transporting these objects across oceans, navigating icebound coasts, and concealing them in remote, inhospitable sanctuaries is to confront a combination of courage, intelligence, and devotion that borders on the unimaginable. The relics are not mere artifacts. They are symbols of persistence, faith, and the enduring human desire to protect what is most precious. In modern times, Speculation about the discovery of such relics has inspired both fascination and controversy. Expeditions searching for anomalies beneath the ice, guided by satellite imaging, radar surveys, and remote sensing, occasionally encounter formations that hint at hidden chambers, depressions, or aligned structures. While conclusive evidence of Templar relics has not been documented, the alignment of historical accounts, legends, and environmental anomalies suggests that the possibility cannot be dismissed outright. These relics, if found, could provide insight into the knowledge, ingenuity, and spirituality of an order that continues to captivate imaginations centuries after its suppression. The Antarctic relics, hidden from the world for centuries, also speak to the Templars' vision of time and preservation. They were acutely aware that the political and religious forces arrayed against them could not only destroy lives but erase history. By concealing relics in a land beyond the reach of ordinary power, they ensured that their mission, knowledge, and faith could endure. The relics thus become part of a temporal strategy, a deliberate extension of the Order's influence beyond immediate human lifespans, creating a legacy that could survive even the collapse of the society that gave rise to the Templars. Ultimately, the legend of these hidden relics transforms Antarctica from a frozen wilderness into a repository of mystery, history, and human ambition. Each glacier, cavern, and ice-covered valley becomes more than a geographical feature. It is a potential guardian of sacred knowledge, a silent witness to centuries of strategy, devotion, and courage. The Templars' foresight, combined with the continent's preservation qualities, suggests that relics could endure almost indefinitely, hidden from view, waiting for those prepared to discover them. They are monuments of faith and intelligence, testaments to the lengths humans will go to protect what they deem invaluable, and to the enduring mystery of the frozen southern continent. Among the most enduring mysteries associated with the Templars is their mastery of maps and encoded cartography, a skill that extended far beyond the simple depiction of roads, rivers, and coastlines. Their maps were instruments of both knowledge and secrecy, designed not only to guide but to protect. They contained layers of meaning: geographic, symbolic, spiritual, and practical. Some of these maps referenced lands uncharted by ordinary medieval explorers, territories described in fragmentary manuscripts as remote, extreme, or cloaked in ice. For the Templars, maps were not mere tools for navigation. They were a means of encoding a worldview, preserving knowledge of sacred relics, hidden sanctuaries, and dangerous truths that could not be left to chance or exposed to hostile powers. These cartographic treasures, often referred to in modern speculation as Templar maps of the edge of the world, were remarkable in their detail and precision. Beyond the familiar Mediterranean, Europe, and the Holy Land, they depict coastlines and landmasses whose existence was unknown to contemporary geographers. Some show southern regions that correspond loosely to the Antarctic continent, ice-covered and largely inaccessible, yet remarkably consistent with modern satellite imaging. Scholars debate whether these depictions are allegorical, speculative, or based on actual expeditions. What is clear is that the Templars were working with knowledge far beyond ordinary experience, combining direct observation, second-hand reports, and encoded wisdom passed through generations. The encoding techniques employed in these maps are sophisticated. Routes are often disguised as artistic flourishes, with rivers, mountains, and coastlines forming patterns that conceal their true meaning. Symbols indicate hazards, safe havens, or hidden caches, while annotations and marginalia are written in ciphers, esoteric languages, or symbolic shorthand. Deciphering these maps requires not only linguistic skill but a deep understanding of Templar philosophy, celestial navigation, and the symbolic associations of geography. Some suggest that the maps contain layered instructions, the first readable by any scholar, the second by trained members of the Order, and a third that reveals hidden paths, sanctuaries, or caches of relics, accessible only to those who could decode the full sequence. The southern extremities depicted in these maps are particularly intriguing. Icebound lands, jagged coastlines, and formations resembling mountains, glaciers, and valleys suggest a conceptualization of Antarctica long before official exploration. Some maps depict symbols consistent with natural phenomena observable in ice-covered regions. Crevasses, magnetic anomalies, and elevated plateaus. In combination with encoded directions, these features may have served as guides for expeditions, indicating routes through treacherous waters and ice fields, locations suitable for shelters, and sites where relics or manuscripts could be concealed. The precision suggests knowledge that was both practical and informed by observation, implying that the Templars' reach extended far beyond conventional medieval understanding. The purpose of such detailed and secretive maps is multifaceted. On one level, they are instruments of navigation, guiding expeditions safely through hostile terrain. On another, they are protective devices, designed to prevent uninitiated or hostile parties from discovering sacred locations or valuable relics. Some cartographers suggest that Templar maps were deliberately deceptive in places, mixing accurate depictions with deliberate distortions, creating a maze of information that could be interpreted correctly only by those possessing the keys. This strategy ensured that knowledge could survive persecution while remaining inaccessible to potential looters, inquisitors, or rivals. The emotional resonance of these maps is significant. For the Templars, each line drawn, each symbol inscribed, and each annotation added was an act of foresight, devotion, and responsibility. These were not merely technical instruments but repositories of faith, knowledge, and strategy. Every map embodies the tension between revelation and concealment, the dual imperative to preserve the sacred while guiding the faithful. For those who used these maps, the experience would have been transformative, navigating not only physical space but symbolic and spiritual dimensions, interpreting the frozen expanses of the South as both real and meaningful. Modern analysis of surviving Templar maps and related manuscripts reveals patterns that are consistent with encoded directions to extreme southern regions. Lines extending from known ports to icy coastlines, symbols indicating hidden bays or depressions, and references to celestial markers suggest a sophisticated understanding of geography, navigation, and environmental hazards. Some marginal notes hint at the existence of sanctuaries or repositories, using language that could only be interpreted by those trained in Templar ciphers. While definitive evidence remains elusive, the convergence of cartographic precision, encoded instructions, and historical legend paints a compelling picture of deliberate strategy, foresight, and ambition. The integration of maps with celestial observation is particularly noteworthy. Templars were trained to use the stars for navigation, combining observation of the heavens with encoded terrestrial markers. This dual approach allowed them to cross vast oceans, locate hidden landmasses, and identify safe routes through ice-laden waters. In the context of Antarctic expeditions, such skills would have been essential. Magnetic anomalies, ice currents, and the extreme latitudes would render ordinary navigation unreliable. By encoding celestial markers into their maps, the Templars created a system that combined natural observation with intellectual rigor, ensuring that only those with specialized knowledge could successfully interpret the paths. Maps also served a symbolic purpose, reflecting the Templars' worldview and philosophy. Mountains, rivers, and ice fields were not merely geographic features. They were metaphors for trial, endurance, and spiritual insight. The southern ice lands were depicted as remote and inhospitable, a test of courage and perseverance, reflecting the idea that sacred knowledge is earned through effort, observation, and devotion. Every expedition guided by these maps was simultaneously a physical journey and a spiritual trial, reinforcing the Templars' dual commitment to faith and practical mastery. The hidden nature of these maps ensured the continuity of knowledge across generations. By encoding directions, landmarks, and locations of sanctuaries or relics, the Templars created a legacy that could outlast persecution, political upheaval, and even the dissolution of their order. The survival of fragments, partial copies, and references in later manuscripts demonstrates the success of this strategy. While the full scope of their knowledge remains elusive, hints of their southern ambitions and secretive expeditions have persisted across centuries. It is a testament to the foresight, discipline, and intelligence of an order operating in a time when secrecy was both survival and strategy. The potential discovery of these hidden Antarctic sites, guided by encoded Templar maps, continues to inspire exploration and speculation. Modern satellite imagery, ice-penetrating radar, and remote sensing have identified anomalies that correspond, at least in part, to features hinted at in historical documents. Crevasses, depressions, and subsurface formations suggest possible pathways or concealed locations, though the harsh environment and vast scale of the continent make definitive identification extremely difficult. Nonetheless, the alignment of legend, cartography, and contemporary observation invites the possibility that the Templars' southern expeditions left tangible traces, encoded in both the land and the manuscripts designed to guide those who followed. Ultimately, the story of the Templar maps and encoded directions is a story of vision, intelligence, and ambition. It demonstrates the Order's capacity to merge observation, faith, and strategy into tools capable of guiding explorers to some of the most extreme and remote environments on Earth. These maps are not merely artifacts. They are a testament to the ingenuity, secrecy, and foresight of a society operating on the edges of the known world. They invite us to consider the possibility that Antarctica, a land of ice and isolation, was once integrated into a network of hidden knowledge, exploration, and sacred preservation, awaiting those capable of deciphering the keys left behind centuries ago.